The hesitation before yes. You ask someone to grab coffee. They pause, not a flinch, but a real moment where their mouth opens slightly and their eyes flick away. Then yes comes, but that delay told you something their words never will. That gap between question and answer is where people live. When someone hesitates before agreeing to something they claim to want, they're not actually wanting it yet. They're negotiating with themselves about what it will cost. The yes that follows a pause isn't enthusiasm. It's a decision buried under calculations, time away from something else, the emotional labor of saying no, whether they can sustain this thing they're about to commit to. Watch yourself in the next invitation, project, or compliment that comes your way. Notice what fills that silence when you pause. It's rarely doubt about whether you like the thing. It's usually doubt about whether you're willing to become the kind of person who says yes to it. That's the real negotiation happening in that breath. The people who know what they actually want rarely hesitate. Not because they're decisive tyrants, but because they've already done the invisible work of knowing their own limits and living inside them. Everyone else hesitates because some part of them is still hoping to be someone they're not quite ready to be, still reaching for a version of themselves that doesn't exist yet. So the next time you catch that pause in someone or yourself, don't rush to fill it with chatter or reassurance. Let it breathe. That hesitation is a person telling you the honest truth about themselves before their mouth catches up to it, and that truth is worth hearing. Enthusiasm that arrives too fast. You meet someone new at a party, and within 5 minutes, they're telling you you're the most interesting person they've met all week. They lean in close. They remember your name perfectly. They ask follow-up questions that feel almost scripted in how attentive they are, and something in your chest tightens, not from joy, but from a quiet alarm bell. That's enthusiasm that arrives too fast, and it's one of the sharpest tells that someone wants something from you more than they want to know you. Real interest builds slowly. It stumbles, it forgets details, and circles back. It's messy because genuine curiosity is messy. But rehearsed enthusiasm, it's too clean. It lands in all the right places. It mirrors your energy back to you like a still pond. The person doing it might not even know they're doing it. They could be a natural salesman, a people pleaser who learned early that speed and intensity get them what they need, or someone practicing a technique they read online. But here's what matters. Enthusiasm that moves too fast is usually designed to move you before you can think. It bypasses your skepticism by flooding you with warmth. And once you feel that warmth, you're more likely to say yes to whatever comes next. The antidote is simple, but requires backbone. When someone comes in hot, slow down. Ask them a harder question. Watch if they can sit with genuine uncertainty or if they panic and rush back to the compliments. People who actually care about you can wait for you to catch up. Everyone else is running a clock. The complaint they make twice. Notice when someone circles back to the same gripe inside a single conversation, often without realizing they're doing it. Your partner mentions feeling ignored at dinner, laughs it off, then drifts back to it 20 minutes later while talking about something else entirely. Your colleague complains about being left out of a meeting, then 3 days later brings up a similar story from months back. That repetition is a signal, not of neediness, but of unfinished processing. The complaint has weight they haven't fully admitted to themselves, and it's sitting in their nervous system like an unsolved equation, waiting for something to complete it. Most people mistake the double mention for nagging, but it's actually the mind's way of saying this matters more than I've let myself acknowledge. The first mention is often casual, deniable, easy to brush off. The second mention is the real one. It's them testing whether you actually heard them or whether they need to turn up the volume. And here's what flips the whole dynamic. When someone repeats a complaint, they're almost never asking you to fix the thing itself. They're asking for acknowledgement that it hurt. They want proof that their pain registered with someone else, that it wasn't invisible. So next time you catch that double tap complaint, skip the problem-solving instinct and go straight to witnessing. Say back what you heard, name why it stung. You don't have to solve anything. Just confirm it was real. That small act of recognition often quiets the entire loop because the complaint was never truly about the problem. It was about being seen. The question asked as a joke. You're at a dinner table and someone laughs and says, "So, when are you having kids?" Or, "You look tired, bad marriage." The room goes quiet for a half second. Everyone knows it's supposedly funny, but there's a barb in it, isn't there? That's not accidental. When people wrap a real question in humor, they're testing the perimeter. They're fishing for something they wouldn't ask directly because they already sense the answer might hurt, or they want plausible deniability if you snap back. Humor is a Trojan horse. It lets them ask the dangerous thing while keeping one hand on the door. And here's what gets you. You feel the weight of the real question even as you're supposed to laugh it off. Your nervous system knows you could answer the joke or answer the wound underneath, and either way, you've just revealed something. If you laugh along and deflect, they know it's tender. If you get quiet, same thing. If you answer seriously, they get what they were looking for. The mechanism is so smooth because it works both ways. The person asking gets to retreat into, "I was only joking," and you're stuck deciding whether to be the one who can't take a joke. So the next time you hear that particular laugh, that careful one that isn't quite sure of the landing, notice what question is actually being asked underneath. Notice what you want to keep private. That's the real tell. The pressure point works because it catches you between honesty and self-protection, and your choice in that moment tells them exactly where you're vulnerable. Denials nobody asked for. Someone mentions a rumor at dinner and your coworker's jaw tightens. "I'm not saying anything," they blurt. "I don't know anything about that." Nobody asked them. Nobody pointed a finger. But there it is, a defense that arrived uninvited, like a confession wearing a disguise. Watch closely. When people volunteer denials before you've even hinted at a question, they're not protecting themselves from you. They're protecting themselves from something they already believe about the situation or themselves. The real pressure point is what they insist they're not doing, not being controlling, not being cheap, not being jealous. The energy behind the unsolicited statement is a compass needle spinning toward the exact thing they fear you'll notice. It's almost mechanical. Kids do it when they've broken something and you haven't found it yet. Partners do it after making a choice they know won't land well. Bosses do it before announcing something unpopular. The denial leaks ahead of the event like water through a crack. Guilt doesn't need an audience to perform for. It performs for yourself first. You carry a story about what you've done or what you are, and when that story feels exposed, the mouth moves faster than thought. Your nervous system betrays the secret before your brain even catches up. So next time someone volunteers a defense you never mounted, don't listen to what they're denying. Listen instead to what they're afraid you'll think, what shame they're trying to outrun before you even spot it. That gap between the question you asked and the answer they gave, that's where the truth actually lives, waiting. The detail they keep repeating. Someone tells you a story about their weekend and mentions, almost offhand, that nobody asked them to come along. 3 minutes later, same story, different angle, they bring it up again. I wasn't really invited, you know? That repetition is a flare gun. Your brain is wired to notice patterns, and when a person returns to the same small fact multiple times, it's never accident. It's a wound asking for air. The detail they keep repeating is the thing they actually care about, sometimes more than the main story itself. Think about the last time you vented to someone. You probably circled back to the same hurt, the same perceived slight, the same injustice, not because you forgot you'd said it, but because it was still hot and needed room to breathe. That repetition is their emotional relief valve, and it's showing you exactly where the pressure sits. In conversations, most people tell you what matters to them through their loop, not through what they lead with. A friend keeps mentioning they weren't thanked. A colleague circles back to being overlooked. A partner returns to that one comment you made weeks ago. These aren't filler. They're breadcrumbs pointing to what they actually need from you and what they fear they won't get. The next time someone repeats a detail, resist the urge to tune it out. Notice the repetition itself. Ask about it gently. I'm hearing that's still bothering you. Then listen hard. You've just found the real conversation hiding beneath the surface one, the thing they came to you needing to know you understood, who they interrupt and who they don't. At any table, watch who gets cut off mid-sentence and who gets the full stage. It's not about manners, it's a map of the nervous system laid bare. That friend who bulldozes your stories but goes quiet the second their boss speaks, that's not contradiction. That's fear and desire showing their hands at once. Interruption is a vote that whispers, "Your words are cheaper than mine right now." Here's the thing nobody admits. People interrupt most aggressively the ones they're not afraid of losing. You're too available, so they crash through. But someone whose approval still feels uncertain, whose absence might sting. They lean back, they listen, they calculate the risk. So when you catch yourself getting interrupted constantly by the same person, skip the sting and ask something harder. What am I broadcasting about myself that makes them feel safe to override me? Have I shown up so reliably that my presence costs them nothing? Now flip the mirror. Who do you interrupt, and who do you protect with silence? Your answer lives there. The person whose every thought you tolerate is someone whose life you actually care about keeping. The one you cut off mid-thought? You've already decided they're replaceable. Your interruption pattern isn't a character flaw. It's a confession of who you believe you can afford to push and who you can't afford to lose. That inventory, that ranking system humming underneath every conversation, that's the real story you're telling without meaning to. The favor they accept instantly. Watch what someone does the moment you offer them something free, not what they say, what they grab. A colleague rushes to accept your help finishing a project, barely hesitating. Your friend immediately says yes to a ride to the airport, no questions. Someone you just met doesn't even pause when you offer to introduce them to someone powerful. That instant, yes, no negotiation, no, let me think about it. That is the pressure point. It reveals exactly what they are short on, what keeps them up at night, what they believe they cannot get enough of on their own. The speed of acceptance is the honesty. A genuinely secure person might say, thanks but decline, or ask what the catch is. Someone drowning in a particular need will swallow pride, skip the social dance, and take the thing because scarcity has already wired them to move fast. You see the same reflex in hunger, in loneliness, in feeling behind at work. The thing they accept fastest is often the thing they most deeply doubt they deserve or can find elsewhere. Now flip the mirror. Notice your own instant yeses. When you say yes before you even finish hearing the offer, you have revealed a gap in yourself you probably have not named yet. That unexplained relief when someone fills it, that small rush of okayness, that is information talking. It tells you what you actually need to work on, not what you think you should want. The gaps we rush to fill are the ones running the show, and they will run it until you see them. Silence after a compliment. You tell someone their presentation was brilliant. They go quiet, not a smile, not a thanks, just a hollow nod and eyes that look somewhere else. Your instinct says maybe they didn't believe you, or they think you're being kind in that patronizing way. But that silence is actually screaming something far more useful. They're meeting your words with a version of themselves that doesn't match what you just witnessed. The capable person you saw doesn't live in their head yet. When someone can't accept a compliment, it's never really modesty. It's the sound of a mismatch between your mirror and their self-image trying to reconcile in real time. They're scrambling to update a story, and silence is what that scramble sounds like from the outside. Here's what gets interesting. That pause reveals whether they've internalized their own competence or whether they're still waiting for external permission to feel good about themselves. Someone secure might deflect with humor or redirect credit, but they'll do it smoothly and move on. Someone fractured will freeze because accepting the compliment means rewriting something fundamental about who they think they are. Uncomfortable work to do while someone's watching and waiting. Pay close attention to what fills that silence next. Do they diminish the work, blame luck, flip it back to you? Each move points directly to where their self-doubt is anchored deepest. And if you want to find someone's real pressure point, contrast generic praise with something specific they actually did well. Watch the silence shrink. The compliment fits faster when it matches the story they already tell themselves. That's your real-time proof that belief isn't about truth, it's about fit. The topic they steer back to. You're in a conversation about nothing in particular, work, the weather, someone's new apartment. And then at some point, your friend or partner gently pivots. Maybe you mentioned a conflict with a sibling and suddenly they're asking follow-up questions about your family. Or you said something brief about a failed project and they circle back to it 3 times in different ways. That steer is not accident. It is a spotlight on what matters to them, what they are genuinely afraid about, or what they wish they could fix. Most people think they hide their priorities well, but they do not. They betray themselves by the doors they keep opening. A conversation has momentum, and if someone breaks that momentum to return to a single thread, that thread is either a worry they cannot shake or a hope they cannot quite admit. The inverse matters just as much. Notice what people actively avoid. If you mention something vulnerable and they rush past it towards safer ground, that silence speaks too. But the steer, the gentle redirect, that is someone telling you what occupies their real mind, often without knowing they are doing it. The pattern is almost mechanical. Watch which story they cannot leave alone. What question do they ask twice? What subject keeps finding its way back into the room no matter how many times you think you've closed the door on it? That is a person showing you what they actually care about, the doors they keep walking through, the worry or hope they cannot put down, what they defend in strangers. Watch a dinner table carefully. Your friend goes quiet and tense when a stranger gets criticized, then suddenly erupts defending someone they've never met. A mild-mannered colleague, a public figure, someone faceless on the internet. The vehemence is strange until you realize it's not really about that person at all. It's about them. When people become passionate protectors of strangers, they're almost always guarding a fragile part of their own story. A woman who fiercely defends someone accused of being cold is often protecting her own distance. Terrified people think the same of her. A man who passionately argues for someone's ambition may be shielding his own hunger for success that his family has always treated as selfish or dangerous. We become bodyguards for strangers because we've needed someone to be a bodyguard for us, and nobody came. The tell is always the heat. Which controversies make their voice rise? Which character assassinations feel personal even though the target is faceless? Which accusations they cannot let sit unanswered? That intensity reveals what they fear people secretly think about them, what shame they're still fighting to survive, what they desperately need permission to be. The passion never lies. Next time someone defends a stranger with unusual fire, listen past the words. You're watching vulnerability wearing a costume of conviction, and that costume is thin. What they fight to protect in others is what they're still fighting to protect in themselves, the part of their identity that still feels raw and unseen, the rule they enforce hardest. Watch someone correct a stranger over a small social rule, the way they interrupt, the edge in their voice, the need to be right. That flash of anger tells you something vital. The rules people police most fiercely are almost never about fairness or logic. They are about what they fear most about themselves. A parent who obsesses over punctuality in their kids often grew up chaotic and terrified of losing control. A friend who snaps when you're late to plans usually learned that abandonment lives in small delays. Someone who demands absolute honesty in a relationship often hides something they're terrified you'll discover. The rule becomes a wall, and it keeps the scary thing on the other side. So here's what's really happening. When you watch someone enforce a boundary with unusual heat, you are watching them protect an old wound disguised as a principle. This is not to excuse their harshness, it is to understand it. And when you understand it, you stop taking it personally. You also start noticing which rules you police most aggressively in others, the ones that make your chest tight when someone breaks them. Those are breadcrumbs leading back to something you decided was unacceptable about yourself long ago. Most of us don't realize we are not teaching others. We are teaching ourselves over and over, hoping someday we will finally listen. The next time you feel that heat rise, pause, and ask what you are actually afraid of. That question alone can break a pattern that's been running quietly for decades, softening both the rules you enforce and the person you've been protecting all along. Envy leaking out as advice. Your friend lands the promotion and immediately tells you the hours are brutal. They meet someone and explain how demanding relationships become. They're moving to the city they've dreamed about, and suddenly the rent is all they can talk about. The pattern is so clean, it almost feels accidental. But watch long enough and you'll notice the advice always flows in one direction, away from what you want for yourself. Here's the thing. Their concerns aren't fabricated. Envy doesn't show up wearing a sign. It arrives dressed as wisdom, as someone looking out for you, as hard-won reality checking. Your brain is excellent at this particular con. It finds the legitimate downsides, and every good thing has them, and zooms in while the benefits fade into background noise, then wraps a warning in genuine care and hands it to you. You feel noble for passing it along, but if you listen to the shape of it, the rhythm, the emphasis, something becomes clear. Does the advice ever actually name what they've gained? Or does it loop endlessly back to how hard it all is? Envy that can't admit itself doesn't sound like resentment. It sounds like protection. When someone offers cautions about your goal, try asking yourself quietly, would they frame it this way if they didn't want it to? Not to blame them, just to separate their envy-colored map from the actual terrain of your decision. The people who genuinely celebrate your wins rarely need to catalog why the win is secretly burdensome. That quiet lack of explanation is the real tell. The compliment with a hook in it. You just got praised, something about how well you handled that meeting or how good you look lately, and for a split second you felt the warmth land. Then something shifted. Maybe they followed it with, I didn't think you had it in you. Or, for someone without formal training, you really nailed it. The compliment didn't die, but a seed got planted instead, one that grows sideways. Now you're replaying it in your head, wondering if the real message was doubt or a subtle reminder that you're somehow not quite where you should be. That's the hook. A barbed compliment works because it flatters you just enough to lower your guard, then slips the needle in while you're distracted by feeling good. You're far less likely to push back on criticism when it arrives wrapped in praise. The person handing it over gets two things at once. They seem kind on the surface, but they've also installed a quiet worry in your head that starts running its own show. You might work harder to prove them wrong. You might chase their approval more aggressively. What's sticky is that it's not always malicious. A parent who says, I'm so proud you got into that school, I know how hard you had to work for it, might just be acknowledging real effort, but the hook is there regardless, waiting. What it reveals is this: we're all listening for what sits underneath the words, not just the words themselves. We're hunting for the real temperature of someone's belief in us. And if you catch yourself doing this to others, you've found a small lever. Compliment fully or don't compliment at all. What they call overrated. Listen closely the next time someone dismisses something as overrated. You're witnessing a confession dressed up as an insult. Your coworker calls meditation pointless. There's someone wired for tangible results. Someone whose nervous system rejects the discomfort of sitting still with uncertainty. That friend who scoffs at designer coffee or luxury watches, they're usually protecting themselves against the shame of wanting what they can't justify owning or can't yet afford. The word overrated sounds light and casual, but it always carries a load underneath. It's defending something, identity, past choices, a hard-won belief that they're smarter than the hype. Notice what doesn't get called overrated. The things that truly don't matter get forgotten, not fought. A parent who sniffs at therapy as overrated was taught that problems stay locked inside. Calling it unnecessary makes their own silence feel strategic rather than painful. A friend rolling their eyes at ambition usually guards against their own fear of trying hard and failing where everyone can see. So shift your instinct when you hear that specific disdain. Stop asking whether the thing actually is overrated. Ask instead, what does this person need to keep believing about themselves to feel safe right now? Underneath almost every dismissal lives someone clinging to a version of themselves they've already invested in, and admitting the thing has value would crack that whole foundation. The real move is catching yourself mid-dismissal, asking what you're protecting, because that moment of discomfort often means you want it more than you're willing to admit, and that wanting feels scarier than any failure. The story told with different endings. A colleague misses your meeting. One narrative, they disrespected you. Another, they were drowning in work. A third, they forgot because you didn't register. Same person, same clock, same calendar. 3 completely different stories living in 3 different heads, each one feeling absolutely true to whoever's telling it. The ending you reach for reveals something raw about what you're actually hungry for underneath. Here's what's really happening. Your brain isn't neutral. It doesn't wait for all the facts before it builds the story. The ending gets written first, often without your permission, and then your mind works backward to collect the evidence that fits. You wanted to feel wronged? Your story will find disrespect everywhere. You wanted to feel generous? Suddenly, they're just exhausted, and you understand. The ending is the skeleton key that unlocks which details matter and which ones you ignore completely. This matters because people are constantly doing this with you too. Your partner ends a conversation early. Your boss doesn't laugh at your joke. Someone doesn't text back for hours. They're already 3 stories deep before you've even opened your mouth. And those stories aren't random. They're shaped by what they secretly need to believe about themselves, about you, about the world. When you catch yourself narrating someone else's motives, pause hard and ask which ending you just chose and why that ending felt true. Not because accuracy doesn't matter, but because the ending you tell reveals what's tender and unhealed in you right now, and that's worth knowing. Who they compare themselves to unprompted. Sit with someone long enough and you'll hear it slip out. A friend's promotion, someone else's relationship scrolling past, the neighbor's paycheck. That comparison nobody asked for, the one delivered like an offhand thought, is a direct wire to what they actually crave and where they feel the gap. You don't compare yourself to people whose lives don't touch yours. The person someone keeps bringing up uninvited is usually someone they measure themselves against in the shadows, someone in their peer group or aspiration zone who already has what they want. It's not random noise. A musician who keeps mentioning another musician's streaming numbers is almost certainly hungry for validation and reach. A parent who brings up how another kid's school performs is probably anxious about their own child's trajectory. The comparison is the wound showing. Here's where it gets sticky. People will often deny these comparisons matter, especially if they pride themselves on not being competitive. But the unprompted mention betrays the official story. They think about it alone. They've rehearsed it. They've named it. So if you want to know what someone truly wants but won't say straight, listen for who they compare themselves to without being asked. It's a vulnerability dressed as a casual sentence. And if you catch yourself doing it, pause there. That moment of noticing is your mind signaling something about your own hunger, your own gap between who you are and who you think you should be. The comparison is the map to what matters most. The excuse offered before it's needed. Someone tells you they might be late to dinner and they haven't even left home yet. A coworker explains why a project might fail 3 weeks before the deadline. Your partner mentions they're tired before you've asked them to do anything. The moment those words land, something shifts. They've already told the story of who they'll be, and your brain accepts it before they even become that person. This preemptive confession is rarely about honesty. It's about control. By naming the failure before it arrives, they reduce its sting and lower your expectations so the bar becomes easier to miss. You stop holding them to the original standard because they've rewritten it for you first. The pattern underneath is almost elegant. People who feel genuinely pressured start constructing escape hatches long before they need them. They're not confident they'll show up, so they're building the narrative that explains why they won't. And here's what you can actually catch in real time. The earlier someone offers an excuse, the less certain they are. Genuine confidence doesn't announce itself ahead of time. A person sure they'll be on time doesn't mention traffic at 5 in the afternoon. A person sure they'll finish doesn't prophesy 3 weeks of obstacles. So next time someone hands you a preloaded apology, notice the gap between now and when they're claiming failure will happen. That gap is where doubt lives. It's a small tell, but it matters enormously, because how people manage pressure before it arrives tells you far more about their actual commitment than how they manage it after. Overcorrection after a small slight. Watch what happens when you say something casual to a friend, a joke that lands flat, or you forget to ask about their day, and suddenly they are laughing louder than usual, asking you 3 questions in a row, over-explaining something small. That whip-snap shift is not about moving on. It is about proving something. When someone overcorrects after a small wound, they are signaling that the wound mattered more than they want to admit, and they are anxious about how you now see them. The exaggerated cheerfulness, the sudden over-attentiveness, the flood of reassurance, these are all smoke. Underneath is a burning question. Do you still like me? Will this tiny thing change how you think of me? It happens because humans are exquisitely sensitive to social position. A small misstep feels like a crack in the foundation, even when it is objectively nothing, so they rush to seal it before you notice. Here's what this tells you about what they really want. They want to matter to you more than they want to seem stable. They will perform certainty, cheerfulness, or compliance as a way of managing your perception. When you spot someone overcorrecting, you are watching someone prioritize your judgment of them over their own authentic response. That reveals how much they need the relationship to feel safe. The sticky part is this: the harder they try to convince you nothing is wrong, the more they are showing you something fragile inside, something that hinges on whether you see them as still worthy of belonging. The gift that reveals the giver. Unwrap a bad gift and you remember it forever. Something too expensive when you wanted simplicity, so practical it stung like criticism, or so wildly off target it proved they don't see you at all. But here's what most people miss: that gift is not a mistake, it's a confession. What someone chooses to hand you is a direct line to what they value, fear, or secretly want you to become. A gift is a vote. Your mom's self-help book votes for your improvement. Your partner's gift that matches their own taste votes for togetherness, for you to want what they want. The thoughtful one, the album from a conversation months ago, the exact coffee brand you mentioned once in passing, votes for your realness, your specificity, your worth as a separate person. The gift giver rarely knows how transparent they are. They think they're just being generous or fun or practical, but generosity itself leaks information. Do they give to feel needed, to lock you into a role they've already written for you, to feel superior, to connect with you as you actually are, to repair something? The wrapped thing unwraps their entire relationship model and how they see your place in it. You learn far more about someone from what they choose to give than from what they claim to want. So next time you hold something someone wrapped for you, pause. Ask what this choice reveals about how they see you and whether that's actually who you want to be in their eyes. The answer often matters more than the gift. What they notice first in a room. Walk into a coffee shop with a friend and notice what happens in the first 3 seconds. Your friend's eyes go straight to the pastry case. Yours scan for an empty table. A third person clocks the nearest exit. None of you are wrong. You are just revealing what your nervous system cares about. The brain does not see a room. It sees a problem waiting to be solved, and that problem is different for everyone depending on what they need, fear, or want most. If you grew up in chaos, your radar for exits is automatic. Your body learned survival early and never really stopped scanning. If you love food, your attention is magnetized to texture, smell, abundance. If you are anxious about belonging, you notice who is talking to whom before you notice anything else. The first glance is not a choice, it is a confession. Watch what someone notices first, and you are watching them tell you their story without words. The perfectionist notices the flawed detail in an otherwise smooth room. The lonely person notices who is alone. The ambitious person notices status and hierarchy. None of this is random. So if you want to know what someone truly cares about, not what they say they care about, but what their nervous system actually prioritizes, pay attention to where their eyes land first. It takes maybe 2 seconds, but in those 2 seconds, you are watching them reveal their true, unguarded world. Pay close attention next time. That first glance is honest in a way words almost never are. Their default apology style. Watch what someone does the moment they realize they've hurt you or made a mistake before they even think. Do they soften? Do they disappear? Do they over-explain until you're more tired than angry? That first instinctive move reveals almost nothing about the mistake itself and everything about how they see themselves when things crack. Some people shrink so fast that they apologize before you finish speaking, practically erasing themselves, as if the error proves they are fundamentally broken and worthless. Others swing hard the other direction, mount a defense, reframe the facts, explain why it wasn't really their fault, turning the moment into a negotiation. Still others go silent and distant, hoping the whole thing evaporates, as if admitting fault would cost them something precious they can't afford to lose. None of these are actually apologies. They're survival moves wearing apologies costume. Real apology is rare because it demands something most people aren't built for, sitting with genuine discomfort without scrambling. I did something that mattered. I caused this. I can hold both those truths without my sense of self-collapsing, but most people are terrified of what that clarity reveals about them, so they do the old dance instead, apologizing to soothe their own shame, not to actually heal you. Pay attention to which flavor someone picks. That pattern doesn't stay quiet. It shows up in how they handle criticism at work, how they respond when you set a boundary, how they treat people with less power. Their apology style is a live map of whether they can be trusted with your real vulnerability or whether your hurt will always become about managing their fear. The name they drop twice. You're in a conversation and someone mentions their ex-partner once, fine. Then 5 minutes later, same person brings them up again. Unprompted, casual, like they just couldn't help it. That second mention is a tell, not because people who miss someone always talk about them, but because the brain repeats what it's working on. We loop back to what has unfinished business, what still has a charge, what we're not done feeling about. A name that surfaces twice in an hour tells you this person is still processing something: resentment, regret, curiosity, anger, longing. The thing they're claiming is over. The ghost just walked through the room again. This works for crushes too. Your friend mentions someone they just met. Sounds casual. Then later, oh, I ran into them again yesterday. That second name drop says their brain is sorting this person into a category that matters. The same pattern shows up with people they dislike. Someone mentions a rival colleague once, then brings them up again mid-story. You know exactly who's living rent-free in their head. Watch closer and you'll catch it everywhere. Names that refuse to stay buried. People who keep sneaking back into the story even when the conversation has moved on. The pressure point is this. People leak their preoccupations through what they can't stop returning to. If you want to know what someone really cares about, who they're stuck on, who they fear, who they secretly admire, listen for the double mention. Pay attention to which names won't leave the conversation alone. That repetition is not random noise. It's the sound of something still pulling at them, still unresolved, still alive. How they describe their last boss. Pay close attention the next time someone vents about their last manager, because they're not really talking about that person at all. They're painting a map of what they needed and never got. The words matter less than the pressure points they keep returning to. If someone fixates on micromanaging, you're hearing a hunger for autonomy and trust that went unmet. Distant or unavailable is code for wanting mentorship, real feedback, someone to show them the path. When unfair keeps surfacing, listen for someone whose nervous system was built for explicit rules and transparent reasoning. The precision of the complaint is your actual signal. Vague grumbling is noise. Specific grievances are the real language of longing. Someone who's furious about a boss taking credit for everything is showing you that recognition hits them deep. It's personal, not academic. The person frustrated by poor communication is revealing they think in frameworks and require language, need to understand the why underneath every move. Someone who says their boss didn't care has usually been through enough rejection that they've learned to read indifference like a threat to their whole self. So next time someone tells you their work story, don't treat it as gossip to forget. You're actually watching them describe what they're hunting for in their next leader, their next chapter. That's the real intelligence in the room. The version of the past they edit. Two siblings grow up in the same house under the same roof, yet one carries memories of cruelty while the other insists everything was normal. Same parents, same events, completely divergent films playing in their heads. Neither is lying. They're both selecting. What gets kept and what gets buried from your past reveals what you need to believe about yourself right now, and that need is never accidental. Your brain doesn't store the past like a video recording. It's more like a sketch artist working from old notes, reshaping the picture every time you tell it, filing away details that fit your current identity and quietly discarding ones that don't. Someone who rewrites early failures as learning moments is constructing a resilience narrative. Someone clinging to them as permanent proof of worthlessness is protecting a different kind of story, maybe permission to stop trying or the right to feel unfixable. Watch how people emphasize. The friend who always opens with, "My parents never had money," might be writing an underdog arc where future wins feel harder earned and authentically theirs. Another dwells on a single cruel comment, keeping it as evidence they were wronged. And wronged people don't carry the same responsibility for their choices. This editing happens beneath awareness most of the time, automatic as blinking. But it's also one of the most honest things about a person you can hear. When someone tells you their story, you're watching them vote with their memory for who they want to be. The version of the past they carry is a mirror showing you exactly which identity they're guarding today. What they do with an unearned win. Watch what happens the moment someone wins something they didn't really work for, a promotion they're not ready for, a compliment they didn't earn, a lucky break nobody saw coming. The reaction splits into two camps fast. Most people either shrink away in quiet shame or they lean hard into the story that it was deserved all along. That split tells you almost everything about how they'll move through the world. The person who feels uncomfortable with unearned luck often has a conscience attached to their self-image. They'll either work twice as hard to justify it or spiral into imposter feelings that poison their confidence for months. But watch the person who accepts it smoothly, rewrites the narrative, and moves forward without friction. They're telling you something crucial. They're comfortable with self-deception in service of momentum. That's not always bad. Real confidence can't exist without a little blindness to the gap between effort and reward. But it's the pressure point where you see if someone's integrity is woven into their identity or just something they perform when witnesses are watching. The real tell isn't whether they celebrate or feel guilty. It's what they do next. Do they quietly work to earn it retroactively? Do they guard the secret and feel hunted by it? Do they convince themselves they always deserved it? People who can sit with the discomfort, who acknowledge the luck without collapsing under it or weaponizing it, those are rare. Everyone else is either building a fragile fortress or running from the truth. Both are exhausting and both show up eventually in how they treat people who are watching, their reaction to someone else's luck. Watch what happens the moment your colleague tells you they got the promotion, the house, the bonus, before their words even finish landing. Does their face light up with genuine warmth? Do they disappear into their phone? Do they pivot hard to their own story? That split second tells you everything about what they actually value and whether they believe the world is big enough for both of you to win. Most people are not taught to notice their own envy, so it leaks out sideways through a delayed text back, a comment about how lucky some people are, or suddenly remembering all the ways that victory is actually hollow. The person who can sit with someone else's good news without immediately dimming it, without pivoting to themselves, without the tiny sting of comparison, that person has made peace with scarcity thinking. They genuinely believe good things are not a pie getting smaller. The tricky part is that high achievers often fool themselves here. They will celebrate your win while running the mental math on what it means for their own standing. Congratulations come with a tiny edge of calculation. So if you want to know who actually trusts you, who sees you as secure rather than competitive, pay attention in those moments when they have nothing to gain and everything to lose by being genuinely happy for you. That reaction is not performance. It is the truth leaking through. And the people who do this well, they tend to build the kind of relationships where luck, real, actual good fortune, finds its way back around. Watch long enough and you will see the pattern hold. The boundary announced loudly. You ever notice when someone feels their boundary might not be respected, they announce it like a public service announcement? I don't do small talk. They tell you 5 minutes into meeting them. I need my space, they emphasize before you've even moved closer. I don't text back fast becomes their opening line. The louder and earlier the boundary drops, the more fragile the person often feels inside. They're not being rude. They're pre-defending against what they expect you to take from them. It's a tell. What they're really saying is, I've been crossed before, and I can't afford to assume you'll respect what I need without hearing it spelled out. The most secure people rarely announce their boundaries at all. They just have them, and they enforce them quietly when needed. Someone who needs to tell you constantly about their limits is usually someone who's learned that asking nicely didn't work, that people pushed until they had to get loud. Here's what makes it stick. When you hear that loud announcement early, you're actually hearing a small wound dressed up as a rule. It doesn't mean dismiss the boundary, respect it completely, but it does mean there's something underneath worth understanding. The boundary itself is real and non-negotiable. What's revealing is the volume and timing. That's where the person's history lives, where the pattern of being ignored or overstepped got written into their voice. Next time you hear someone declare their terms unprompted, get curious about what they're protecting themselves from. That curiosity is the difference between just keeping your distance and actually seeing the person, who they text when nothing is wrong. Watch your hand move to your phone in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. No crisis, no reason, just a nudge to share something small with someone, a dumb joke, a weird observation, nothing on the line. That person, the one who gets the unfiltered, nothing to prove version of you, is not your emergency contact. They are your real contact, your gravitational center. Most of us carry a story about who matters most, the family we're obligated to, the colleagues we network with, the friends we feel guilty drifting from. But the person you reach for in the small, purposeless moments, the ones where you have nothing to gain and nothing to prove, they're the actual measure of where you live in someone's life. No performance required, no agenda hiding underneath. You're just letting them in on the boring, beautiful, mundane stuff that makes a life feel real. Here's what most people miss. Someone will show up massive for you during the crisis, the big moment, the thing that supposedly matters, and still never be the person you text at 3 p.m. with nothing in particular to say. They're not living in your small hours. They're not part of the ordinary texture, and if you're always the one reaching out in those gaps, always the one starting the conversation that goes nowhere special, your nervous system already knows the truth about where you sit in someone's life, even if your mind is still negotiating. Real connection breathes in both directions, especially when nothing important is happening. The small moments are where people show you who you actually are to them. The pause when money comes up. Watch a room the moment someone names a number, a salary, a price, how much they paid for something. Most people sail right through, but there's always someone whose breath catches, whose eyes flicker, whose whole body seems to stall for half a second before they answer. A friend gets quiet before saying what their rent is. A colleague hesitates before naming their rate. Your partner's jaw tightens before discussing the credit card bill. That micro silence isn't shyness or bad math skills. It's the moment their actual relationship to money flashes across their face before the social script locks back in place. In that pause lies the whole story. Whether money feels like shame, like scarcity, like proof they're not good enough, or like something dangerous to want out loud, the pattern shows up everywhere. Desire touches numbers. People will talk for hours about what they think they should want, but the second you ask what it costs, there's that split second where the truth leaks through. Some pause because they fear judgment. Some because they're terrified by their own hunger. Some because they were taught that wanting anything for yourself is greedy or selfish. Notice that the pause is never the lie. The words that follow usually are. If you want to know what someone truly values, what genuinely scares them, or what they've internalized, they're not allowed to need. Skip the explanation entirely. Watch the hesitation. Listen to the shape of silence. That's where the unfiltered story lives, waiting. How they treat waiters and interns. You're at dinner with someone you're still figuring out, and the waiter brings the wrong order. Watch what happens next. Does the person snap or smile, blame the kitchen or themselves? That 5-second reaction contains something true about who they are when power stops mattering. The people kind to those who can't hurt them or help them are revealing something that rarely gets faked under stress, their baseline kindness, their actual empathy, not the performed version they wear to impress peers. Therapists and hiring managers pay close attention to this exact moment because it's a pressure test where the mask slips. There's no penalty for cruelty and no obvious gain from grace. An intern, a barista, a junior colleague are all testing grounds where character gets honest. But here's where it gets interesting. The people genuinely decent to those below them aren't doing it for reputation or leverage. They've internalized something about human dignity that doesn't shift based on utility. They don't see the waiter as less than or the intern as a stepping stone. That kindness is structural, not situational. Conversely, the ones who shift their tone, who bark at staff and charm executives, have shown you exactly how they measure human worth, by proximity to power. The mask isn't just politeness, it's proof they believe different people deserve different versions of respect depending on what those people can do for them. Next time you're with someone new, skip the handshake and the small talk. Watch how they treat the person taking their order or answering their emails. That small interaction tells you everything about their character without a word spoken. The advice they give but never take. Listen to what someone tells other people to do, and you have just heard their confession. Your friend who always preaches about boundaries, watch how she volunteers to fix her sister's marriage. The guy who lectures everyone about health and discipline, he skips the gym 3 months running. There's something almost tender about this gap. It's where people live out the version of themselves they wish they were, even if they can't quite manage it in their own lives. The advice they give is often brutally honest. It's just not directed at them. They know the move. They see the pattern in someone else's life with crystalline clarity, the way a therapist reads a room. But when the mirror points back, something shifts. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's identity. You can't be the person who finally stands up to her family if standing up is what broke your spine. Maybe it's shame that the person who knows better still can't do better. They become teachers, then, handing out the wisdom like a gift to someone else's life, which is both generous and self-protective at once. Watch long enough and a pattern emerges. If someone keeps giving the same advice to different people, they're not trying to save those people. They're trying to save the version of themselves that still believes change is possible. The next time you hear this, try something quiet. Notice it without announcement, and maybe ask them why they think it applies to everyone but them. That question sits differently than judgment. Whose approval ends the argument? You know that moment when you're in a fight with someone and suddenly a third person walks in, maybe a boss, a parent, a friend you both respect, and the whole temperature shifts? The argument doesn't actually resolve, but both of you pause, recalibrate, maybe even soften. That pause reveals something raw. You were never really arguing about the stated thing. You were both performing for an invisible judge. Think about your last disagreement with a partner or colleague. Notice who you both deferred to, not explicitly, but through tone, through what you felt safe saying or not saying. Sometimes it's someone in the room. Sometimes it's a parent from 30 years ago, still sitting in your chest, still vetting your right to anger. The person whose approval matters most isn't always the loudest voice. They're the one whose silence stings. And here's what makes it so sticky. You can be completely right and still lose the argument if you lose the approval of whoever matters in that moment. Families stay silent for years over things nobody can quite name. The real pressure point isn't the disagreement itself. It's the hunger underneath it. That invisible scorekeeper determines not just how you fight, but whether you even feel allowed to fight at all. Next time you feel an argument tightening, pause and ask yourself quietly, whose approval am I actually trying to win right now? The answer almost never matches the words you're using. The threat they never carry out. You know that person in your life, maybe a parent, a partner, a boss, who keeps saying they'll leave, quit, cut you off, but never does. Year after year, the same threat hangs there like a sword that never falls. What you're watching is someone using threat as a control tool, not as a genuine boundary. Real consequences don't announce themselves repeatedly, they just happen quietly. The fact that they keep threatening but never following through tells you something sharp about what they actually want. They don't want out. They want you afraid of them leaving. They want the power of the threat more than the relief of the actual break. This is a person whose real need is influence, not freedom. When you name this pattern, something shifts. Their threats aren't warnings, they're performance. They're a way of saying, pay attention to me, change for me, prove you need me, without risking the security of the relationship itself. And here's the trap. If you keep believing each threat as real, you stay locked in low-level panic, reorganizing your life around avoiding an exit that probably won't come. But if you call it clearly, you get to decide whether you want to be someone who lives under a threat that's all noise and no follow-through. The move that matters is noticing when you've stopped flinching at the threat itself. That's when you know you've finally seen it for what it is. Sometimes the most liberating thing you can do is believe them when they say they'll leave and stop being shocked when they don't. What they check on their phone first. You wake up and reach for your phone before your eyes are fully open. What's the first thing you tap? Not the weather, not the news, the thing your nervous system believes matters most in that raw, unfiltered moment before your rational brain wakes up. That first app is basically your emotional priority made visible, and it's one of the most honest things about you that you're probably not even aware of. If it's messages or calls, you're wired for connection. You need to know if someone needs you or if you've missed something social. If it's email, you're hooked to your work identity, your sense of value tangled up in productivity. Instagram or TikTok first thing, you're hungry for external validation or novelty before you've even had water, the stock ticker, the dating app, the banking app. Each one is a little confession about what fear or desire runs deepest in your waking nervous system. Most people will deny this pattern even as they're living it. They'll say they just grabbed their phone randomly. But randomness isn't really how dopamine works. Your brain knows exactly which hit it needs before consciousness fully arrives. The weird part is that watching what someone else checks first is often more revealing than asking them what matters to them. Someone will tell you they value family while they're checking work notifications before they've hugged their kid. The phone never lies about priority, even when we do. Next time you hand someone your phone, notice what they reach for first without thinking. It's a tiny window into their actual weight system. The plan that never gets scheduled. You've had the same 3 coffee dates in your head for 6 months. Your friend keeps texting about finally trying that restaurant. Your therapist suggested you take a weekend trip alone. None of it happens. Not because you don't want it, you do, genuinely, but because the gap between wanting and actually blocking the time on your calendar feels impossibly wide. That gap is not laziness. It's a window into what you actually value, and it's brutal to see clearly. When something stays perpetually planned but never scheduled, you're watching yourself choose something else instead, over and over. Maybe it's the comfort of already open time. Maybe it's a half-conscious fear that the coffee date or the trip won't be as good as the idea of it. Maybe scheduling it makes it real, and real things can disappoint. The real tell is what you do schedule without friction, obligations, things with external deadlines, other people's needs. But your own plans, they float in a cloud of good intentions that never quite land on the calendar. Watch what stays unscheduled for months. That's not a to-do item. That's a signal about whether you actually trust yourself or whether some part of you is still waiting for permission, still half believing you don't deserve the uninterrupted time. The calendar is a mirror. It doesn't care about your good intentions. It only shows what you decided mattered enough to defend. Next time you hear yourself say, "We should do this," ask quietly, "Am I saying this because I mean it, or because saying it feels like doing it?" That answer rewires everything because the calendar never lies about your real priorities. How they handle being told no. Watch someone's face the millisecond after you say no. Not the polite version that comes 5 seconds later, but the raw, unguarded moment. That's when the truth arrives. Some people absorb the word like a brick wall absorbs rain, their face settling into acceptance. Others crumble inward, shoulders dropping. A few go very, very quiet. And that quiet is worth noticing because it's the sound of calculation happening in real time. When someone hears no and immediately shifts into problem-solving mode, testing your actual resolve, looking for legitimate workarounds, genuinely trying to understand why you set the boundary, there's someone who respects friction as real. They'll negotiate, sure, but they won't pretend you didn't mean it or that the door is still secretly open. Then there are the people who smile and nod while their eyes flash with something sharper, already writing the script for the next angle. They don't accept constraints as real. They treat them like temporary inconveniences to navigate around. The dangerous ones aren't rude about it. They're charming about it. They'll ask again in a different way next week, counting on you forgetting or softening over time. And watch for those who get angry. Not the explosive kind, the cold kind. The ones who say, "Okay, but now you're on notice." You've made yourself an opponent. How someone takes rejection is how they take reality itself. It shows whether there's someone who can sit with discomfort or someone who will keep testing until the world bends to their will. The self-deprecation that fishes. You've heard it 1,000 times. Someone does something impressive, then immediately undercuts it with, "Oh, I'm just lucky," or "Anyone could have done that." What looks like humility is often a very precise fishing line cast into the water, waiting for someone to grab the other end and pull back with reassurance. This isn't always conscious. The person fishing might genuinely feel small inside, but the mechanism is undeniable. Self-deprecation that fishes creates a vacuum that invites others to fill it with validation. You become the person who has to contradict them, defend their worth, pump them back up. It feels generous when you do it, like you're being a good friend. But here's what's actually happening. They've trained you to be their emotional life raft, deployed every time they cast that particular line. The sneaky part is that this works brilliantly. Compliments given freely feel cheaper than compliments you had to argue for. If someone makes you work to convince them they're talented, you end up more invested in believing it. They've turned you into their validator in chief, and now you have skin in the game. The deeper trap is that over time, you start protecting their fragility instead of calling them forward. If you catch yourself doing this, the move is simple but uncomfortable. Let the fishing line sink. Don't rush to fill the silence with reassurance. Let them sit with what they said. That discomfort is where real confidence actually grows. Their tolerance for being watched. Slip into a room where someone's already working and watch the exact moment they notice you. The camera turns on, the boss steps closer, the air shifts, and there's that split second where they recalibrate. Most people clock the nervousness and move on, but the real tell is the size of the flinch. Someone genuinely solid at what they do might hate an audience, but they stay in their body, keep working, don't vanish into another version of themselves. Someone else goes rigid, closes the laptop, changes their voice, sweeps files away, and that person isn't protecting privacy. They're protecting a story about who they are that doesn't match the person they become alone. The gap between the watched self and the unwatched self is where shame lives, quiet and precise. Think about your own reflexes. Would you handle that email differently if your partner walked in? Change your tone on a call? Close the browser? The size of that shift maps exactly onto the distance between who you believe you are and who you're becoming. What's genuinely revealing is that most people mistake their reaction for simple discomfort when it's actually a spotlight on what they don't trust about themselves, not to condemn them, to understand what they're protecting. Someone truly proud doesn't need walls. Someone genuinely struggling won't build them even in solitude. The ones who transform the moment you arrive, who become a different person under observation, that's where their real architecture of wants and fears gets exposed. Pay attention to how much of themselves they hide, the subject that makes them generalize. Listen closely when someone gets asked about money, politics, or their ex. You'll catch the moment their voice hardens, their language flattens, and suddenly they're speaking in absolutes. That person, that whole category of people, they're all the same. That shift is the pressure point, and what's driving it isn't stupidity, but shame, fear, or a wound that still bleeds when touched. When we're triggered, the brain stops gathering evidence and starts protecting. Money becomes abstract and absolute. Rich people are selfish. Poor people are lazy because examining your own financial shame feels too raw, too close. Politics turns binary because admitting complexity means admitting you might be wrong, and that's terrifying when your identity is welded to the position. The subject someone will generalize about hardest is almost always one where they've felt powerless, humiliated, or deeply betrayed. And here's why this matters as a pressure point. If you want to know what someone truly fears or what's actually hurting them, follow the trail of certainty. Listen for where they stop thinking and start sorting people into bins. The vague targets they attack with the most conviction are usually just mirrors of their own pain reflected outward. If you catch yourself doing this, if you notice you're generalizing about a type of person with unusual heat, pause and ask what you're defending against. The absoluteness itself is the confession. The real story, the one that would change everything, lives in the exceptions they've trained themselves to skip over, the nuance that feels too dangerous to acknowledge. What they call a coincidence. You bump into someone from your past on a random Tuesday, and the first thing your brain screams is, "What are the odds?" A song plays that matches your exact mood. You text a friend at the same second they text you. These moments feel like the universe is speaking directly to you, like something larger than randomness just winked. But here's what's actually happening. You are experiencing pattern seeking in overdrive, mixed with selective memory that only highlights the hits and buries the thousands of near misses, the songs that didn't match, the people you didn't randomly bump into, all the ordinary moments your mind simply erases from the real. The psychological stickiness comes from feeling personal. Coincidences feel chosen, and that feeling is so much more powerful than probability, so most people will believe in cosmic alignment over math. The real pressure point arrives in the moment someone uses coincidence as proof of destiny, proof you're meant to be together, proof of a special connection. When someone is selling you on coincidence, they are usually selling you on surrendering your skepticism. They want you to feel like something larger than choice is moving you forward, so you stop questioning whether this person or situation is actually good for you. The trap isn't the coincidence itself, it's the seductive quietness that comes after, the way impossible odds can make mediocre situations feel fated. Watch for that small voice, asking if the odds really matter more than whether you feel safe, seen, or valued. That voice knows the difference between magic and manipulation. That voice is worth listening to. Their behavior in a slow line. Watch someone at the grocery store checkout when it's barely moving. Not the moment it starts, but 10 minutes in when nothing has changed and the mask slips. The phone appears fast, weight shifts, jaw tightens. Some people sigh loud enough for everyone to hear. Others go eerily still, mentally checked out before the first item scans. That stillness is often worse than anger because it means they've already left the room. These small ruptures reveal something much deeper than impatience. They show you what a person's illusion of control looks like when it fractures. The person who gets sharp with the cashier believes they should matter more than the system. The person scrolling Instagram like the world isn't happening is already practicing not caring, rehearsing indifference as armor. The one striking up conversation with a stranger is reframing the wait as connection, buying themselves meaning instead of time. None of this is accidental. Each response is a tiny confession about what that person needs to feel safe, recognition, distraction, or belonging. But here's what really matters. Watch how long they stay wound up once the line finally moves. Some people simmer angry for 3 aisles. Others forget instantly, the moment restored. That gap between how quickly the wound closes tells you everything about their relationship with their own agency. Do they believe the world owes them smooth roads, or have they made peace with friction as the price of existing? What you're witnessing in that slow line is someone's unfiltered answer, urgent and honest. The person they never mention. Listen for the gap in someone's story. A colleague talks endlessly about their family, their wins, their frustrations, but one person never surfaces. A friend narrates their entire life except for this one human who used to matter, now swallowed by pure silence. That absence is data. It usually means one of 2 things. The relationship wounded them so deeply they cannot risk speaking it aloud, or it mattered so much that naming it makes them feel too vulnerable, too exposed. Either way, you have found where the real weight lives. The people we actively avoid talking about are often the ones whose opinion of us still shapes how we move through the world years later. A parent's disappointment, an old friend's betrayal, a love that did not choose us back. We do not erase these people by not mentioning them. We carry them as invisible weight, and everything we do becomes partly a response to their ghost. What makes this useful is recognizing it in yourself first. Who have you stopped talking about. Notice whether you change the subject, laugh it off, or go blank when they come to mind. That moment of blankness is where you are protecting something. Maybe protecting yourself from admitting how much they still matter. The next move is not forced talking. It is simple honesty. Let yourself feel what that person's absence in your words actually means. Sometimes naming the silence, even just to yourself, is enough to stop it from running you quietly in the background, shaping choices you do not fully understand. Pay attention to who gets edited out of your narrative. That is usually who is still editing you. How they spend a free hour. Ask someone what they'd do with a sudden free hour, and you'll hear the fantasy version. Exercise, call a friend, finally read that book. Then watch what they actually do. There's your answer, unfiltered and true. Not the one they rehearsed, but the one their nervous system chose when nobody was watching and no guilt was present. That gap between the ideal self and the real self is where all the actual motivation lives, and it's almost never about laziness. Someone who scrolls for 60 minutes instead of calling their mom isn't broken. They're showing you that in that moment, stimulation felt safer than connection. The person who immediately tackles a project they meant to get to is telling you something about how they manage anxiety through productivity. The one who naps is revealing a deficit they're not discussing in therapy yet. The friend who cleans tells you something about control. The one who stares at the wall is maybe finally letting their mind settle, and that's rarer than you think. Here's what shifts everything. You can't argue someone into different desires, and shaming them for wanting what they want only pushes the truth deeper underground. But if you want to understand what someone actually needs, not what they think they should want, watch the free hour. No script required, no performance anxiety, no one to impress. That's when the real story comes out. And if you're honest about your own free hour, it usually tells you something you've been too busy to admit about what you're really running from or toward. The lie that cost them nothing. Someone tells you they forgot your birthday, or that they didn't see your message, or that they'd love to help, but they're just swamped right now. The lie itself is small, almost forgivable. But here's what reveals who they are. They chose the lie because telling the truth would have cost them something. Not money, not time, just comfort. Just the ability to avoid a small moment of awkwardness or a tiny bit of shame. And that's the tell. When someone will lie about something that has no real penalty except social friction, you know, they prioritize their own ease over your experience of them. It's not conspiracy-level deception, it's the everyday version where someone texts back after 3 days with, "Didn't see this," knowing full well their phone buzzes constantly. Or they say they're busy when really they just don't want to engage. The cost to them of honesty is so minimal, just a few seconds of discomfort, yet they still reach for fiction. What this reveals isn't evil. It's something quieter and more telling, a refusal to let you know them, a preference for the version of themselves they've curated over the messy, overextended, sometimes disinterested person they actually are. Watch how people behave when the truth would only mildly inconvenience them. That's when you see whether they value the relationship or just the idea of having you around. The pattern matters more than any single slip. The liars teaching you the most aren't the ones with schemes. They're the ones too tired to be honest about being tired, too uncomfortable to say no, too self-protective to risk being seen. How they exit a good conversation. There's a moment in every real conversation when the energy shifts upward. Both of you are actually present. Laughter breaks through. The words feel less like noise and more like meaning. Watch what happens next. Do they keep talking? Pile on another story? ask you another question like they're trying to hold the moment in amber, or do they let it crest naturally and actually walk away? That boundary they choose is a direct line to what they're hungry for. The person who can't seem to leave a good moment, who keeps extending, resisting the end, clinging to the warmth, often grew up in a scarcity of attention. They learned that good feelings are rare and slippery, so you have to squeeze every drop before it vanishes. They want a reassurance that you'll choose them again. Then there's the person who exits while the glow is still alive. They weren't starved of connection. They trust that another good conversation will exist. They're comfortable enough not to drain every last drop. But notice the third type. People who wrap up too early, who edge toward the door before the energy even peaks. That's not disinterest. That's fear running the show. They're afraid if they stay, you'll actually see them. Afraid intimacy carries risk. Afraid tomorrow won't come. The way someone leaves tells you what they believe about themselves and what they think they deserve. So next time you're in something that's working, stop and notice your own exit pattern. How long do you let yourself stay in something good before you retreat? What are you protecting by leaving? The identity hiding in their humor. Listen to what someone refuses to laugh at. That invisible fence marks the territory of who they actually are. Humor is a mirror held at arm's length, showing exactly what people won't examine, because the things we mock hardest are often the things we fear we might become, or the parts of ourselves we're quietly trying to kill. When someone makes the same joke over and over, they're not being repetitive. They're patrolling a border. The exaggeration, the target, the timing of the punchline, it all broadcasts an identity they're either defending or advertising to the world. A person who constantly jokes about being incompetent might be terrified of judgment, but also secretly asking for permission to be flawed. Someone who mocks others for being too sensitive is often protecting their own rawness with a fence made of laughter. The joke is the confession. The safer someone feels, the darker and more specific their humor becomes, because they're no longer performing for approval. They're just being. When someone's guard drops completely, that's when the humor shifts from protective to honest, from armor to authentic. So when you want to understand what someone really values, what threatens them, what they're ashamed of or proud of, stop listening to their words and start tracking what makes them laugh. Listen to the topics they sidestep. Listen to who they become when the joke lands and the room goes quiet. That's where the actual person lives, in the space between the punchline and the silence after, unguarded and real. How they respond to praise for others. Watch what happens the next time someone else in the room gets a compliment. Do they smile and mean it? Do their eyes go somewhere else? Do they suddenly find a reason to talk about themselves, or worse, to subtly diminish what just happened? That tiny moment tells you everything about whether they see the world as a pie with limited slices or a kitchen that keeps baking. A person genuinely secure doesn't feel threatened by your win, because your win doesn't shrink their win. But someone running on scarcity, whether it's emotional or professional, they hear praise for you as a quiet theft. They can't celebrate freely because celebration feels like an admission that they're losing. What's wild is how automatic this is. You'll see them do the mental gymnastics in real time. The forced laugh, the quick pivot, the comment that sounds supportive but carries a tiny blade underneath. That's great. And by the way, when I did something similar, it's not malice usually. It's just fear wearing a smile. The pressure point here is that people can't hide this reaction easily. Their body knows the difference between genuine joy and managed politeness faster than their brain can construct the lie. So, if you want to know whether someone trusts that there's enough good stuff to go around, or whether they're white-knuckling through life afraid there isn't, just hand them a moment where someone else shines. Their face will answer before their mouth does. Watch long enough, and you'll know exactly what they believe about abundance in their own life, what they refuse to be taught. Watch someone's face the moment you suggest they're wrong about something they've decided is true. Not wrong in fact, but wrong in identity. The resistance isn't intellectual, it's almost physical, like you've asked them to betray themselves. That refusal to learn something specific, that wall that goes up, tells you everything about what matters to them. What people refuse to be taught is almost always what they've already made part of who they are. A parent who won't hear criticism of their parenting style isn't defending an abstract theory. They're protecting their sense of being good, something they've fused into their core identity. Someone who refuses to learn about nutrition isn't being stubborn about health facts. They're defending a version of themselves that doesn't need to change, doesn't need help, doesn't need to admit a gap. Here's the thing, we all do this. We learn freely in neutral zones, in spaces where knowledge feels safe and separate from who we believe ourselves to be. But the moment learning threatens the identity we've constructed, the competent one, the loyal one, the strong one, the person who has it figured out, our brain treats it like a threat to survival itself. So people don't just ignore contradictions, they actively resist them, mock them, rewrite evidence against them. The pressure point isn't the information itself, it's the identity behind the refusal. When you bump against what someone absolutely will not learn, you found something they're protecting as though their life depends on it, because somewhere deep down, they genuinely believe it does, and knowing that changes how you approach them entirely. The nostalgia they choose. Watch someone's face light up when they talk about the good old days, and you're seeing something far more honest than any resume or carefully rehearsed story. The past they reach for, whether it's a golden childhood, a decade they lived through, or a world they never actually experienced, is almost always a confession about what's missing right now. Your friend who endlessly rehashes high school glory days isn't really stuck there. They're pointing at a specific wound, a gap between who they were and who they've become. Maybe it's the feeling of uncomplicated belonging or the sense that life still felt like it could go anywhere. A colleague obsessed with how we used to do things before the company changed often isn't defending the old way at all. They're grieving some version of themselves that felt more powerful, more heard, more necessary in that system. The nostalgia people choose to amplify reveals exactly what they believe they've lost. And here's the thing, it's rarely about the actual past. You know this in your own skin. The memories you replay aren't random. You return to moments that felt like proof of something you needed to believe about yourself or your place in the world. When someone keeps reaching backward, ask quietly to yourself, never out loud, what feeling are they actually chasing? What do they need to know is still possible? Notice how that question sits different than judgment. It turns their nostalgia from dead weight into a map of their hunger, and sometimes just naming it breaks the spell. Their first question about a new person. Watch what your friend asks first the moment you mention you've met someone new, not the job title or age. I mean the question that tumbles out before they've had time to think. The one that reveals what their nervous system has been hunting for since childhood. Someone blurts, "Are they nice?" And you've just glimpsed their whole operating system. They learned early that safety lives in kindness, and they're still checking for it. Another fires back, What are they doing with their life? Or are they ambitious? They need proof someone's moving forward, building something, not stuck. A third asks, "Did you feel safe?" And suddenly you know they learned their own comfort was secondary, that other people's feelings came first. That opening question is never random. It's the filter your friend has been running on every human they've met since they were small, and now they're running it on yours. Some scan for stability, some for intelligence, humor, loyalty, money. None of it shallow, all of it protective. They're really asking, will this person hurt us? But they can only ask it in the language their early years taught them. When someone asks the same first question about every new person in your orbit, you're watching someone try to shrink their anxiety down to one checkable thing. That pattern is loud and true about what frightened them earliest and what they're still standing guard against. Listen for it, and you'll know something real about the people you love that they might not tell you directly. What they photograph and never post. Your friend takes 17 photos of their morning coffee, then deletes 16. The one that stays gets edited twice and posted at exactly 9:47 a.m. There is psychology living in those deleted frames, in the gap between what happened and what the world gets to see. The unposted photo is often the truest thing. Maybe it's a candid shot where their face doesn't match the highlight reel, or their kitchen looks lived in instead of styled, or someone they love appears happy in a moment they haven't yet decided counts as public. We curate not because we're liars, but because we're protecting something, an image, a narrative, a version of ourselves we're still building. What gets deleted reveals the gap between who someone thinks they are and who they actually want to be known as. That tension is where the real hunger lives. Watch what people photograph but never share, and you'll see their private wish list, the body they're working toward, the relationship they want to feel secure enough to brag about, the accomplishment they're scared to claim out loud. The unposted photo is a whispered confession. It's them saying, "I want this to be true about me, but I'm not ready to bet my reputation on it yet." That hesitation is not weakness. It's the mark of someone who still cares what they become, who hasn't decided yet that the performance is all there is. The next time you catch yourself deleting a photo, pause and ask why. The answer is almost always about something you want so badly you're afraid to jinx it by showing it. How they narrate their own failures. Listen to how someone talks about the last time they messed up, not what happened, but how they frame it. Do they say, "I failed," or "it happened to me"? That tiny difference is a spotlight shining directly into what they actually believe about themselves. When a person owns a failure cleanly, they're telling you they believe failure is something they can learn from, something temporary and solvable. When they slip into passive voice, mistakes were made, the timing wasn't right, nobody told me, they're showing you they see themselves as a passenger in their own life, not the driver. This isn't about being harsh or self-flagellating. It's about whether someone has built a narrative where they matter, where their choices carry real weight and consequence. People who can say, "I did this wrong and here's what I do differently," are already halfway to changing because they've stopped negotiating with reality. People who have to protect their ego with a clever angle every time they stumble, they'll likely repeat the same pattern because admitting they have agency feels too dangerous to their sense of self. The person who narrates their failures as if they were a tragic accident is someone who will probably keep having accidents. The person who treats their failure as data they collected, uncomfortable but useful, is someone actually building something real. The shift matters because it reveals whether they've given themselves permission to be imperfect and still worthy of growth. So when someone close to you trips, listen carefully to how they talk about the stumble. That's where you spot who's actually growing and who's just getting better at protecting themselves. The concession made too easily. Someone asks for something and you say yes almost before they finish the sentence. Feels generous in the moment, right? But watch what happens next. They often value it less, trust it less, sometimes even resent you for it. There is a quiet trade happening that most of us miss. When something costs nothing to get, your brain codes it as worth nothing. This is partly why a job you land instantly feels hollow, why a partner who pursues you with zero resistance starts to feel untrustworthy, why a yes that came too fast can make someone wonder what you're hiding or what you're desperate for. The person asking did not just want the thing, they wanted to feel like the thing mattered enough to cost you something: effort, time, a moment of hesitation, an internal struggle. When you cave immediately, you send data that either you never really cared about your boundary or the thing itself was not valuable. Now flip it. Think about what you've asked for and how people push back just a little. That resistance, it actually makes you want it more. It makes you trust the yes when it finally comes. Salespeople have weaponized this so well, they've built entire systems around it. The soft no, the pause, the almost refusal that makes the eventual agreement feel earned. You do not have to be manipulative about this. But noticing when you give too easily, when you soften too fast, when you say yes before you've actually thought, that awareness alone shifts how people read your boundaries and your value. What you protect, people believe in. Their behavior after an insult lands. Watch what someone does in the 3 seconds right after you've said something that stings, not what they say back, what their body does. Do they freeze and go quiet? Do they laugh it off immediately? Do they lean back and physically create distance? That tiny window tells you everything about what they're actually protecting. If someone gets insulted about their intelligence and goes stone still, intelligence matters to them in a way that cuts deep. If the same insult rolls off them like water, then maybe they've made peace with it. Or maybe they never hung their identity there to begin with. The tricky part is that people almost always lie in that moment, even to themselves. They'll tell you it doesn't bother them while their jaw tightens. They'll make a joke while their eyes go cold. We're wired to protect our egos faster than we can think, so the real data isn't in their words. It's in the flinch, the hesitation, the overcompensation. This is why people who want to understand you will sometimes say something that lands wrong on purpose, because they're not trying to hurt you, they're reading you. They're finding the shape of what you're defending. The vulnerability you show in that moment, even accidentally, reveals the architecture of what you believe about yourself. So next time someone insults you, stay aware not of the sting, but of your own response. What did you rush to defend first? That answer is the treasure map to who you actually think you are, and that map rarely lies to anyone paying attention. What they save and never use. Walk into someone's closet or kitchen cabinet, and you will see a pattern nobody talks about. The expensive thing they bought months ago, still in the box, still promising. The fancy coffee maker gathering dust. The lipstick shade that looked perfect in the store, the course they paid for and never opened. These are not mistakes or laziness. They are maps of what we desperately wanted to believe about ourselves, frozen in time. We do not buy these things to use them. We buy them to own the identity they represent. The person who drinks good coffee, the person who takes care of her skin, the person who learns new skills. And the moment we buy it, the purchase does the emotional work. We get to feel like that person without the effort of actually becoming them. That is the transaction, and it works until someone asks us about it. Then comes the deflection. I will use it soon, or I have just been busy, or I am saving it for the right moment. Never a pause to notice that we have said this before about other things. What haunts people is not that they wasted money, but that they wasted the chance to know themselves. The gap between the person who buys and the person who acts reveals something sharp, a hesitation, a fear, a mismatch between desire and commitment. Look at your own saved and unused things, not as failures, but as questions. What was I actually hoping to become? And why did I think buying it was the same as becoming it? The role they take in a group. Watch someone walk into a room full of strangers and you'll see a small miracle of self-invention. Some people become louder, some fold smaller, some scan for conflict, some hunt for allies. That instant choice, the role they grab, tells you almost everything about what they're starving for. A person who always becomes the organizer isn't necessarily a natural leader. They might be terrified of chaos and seeking control. The person who plays peacemaker in every conversation might be addicted to being needed or running from their own anger. The joker, the questioner, the one who stays silent, each is an answer to a hunger they might not even know they have. The thing that catches most people off guard is that these roles are not fixed. The same person becomes a different character depending on the group's makeup, status, and history. Put someone with their boss and they shrink. Put them with their mentor and they glow. Put them with their oldest friend and watch which version shows up. This shape-shifting is not fakeness. It's survival instinct meeting need. They unconsciously choose the role that will keep them safest, most valued, most seen. If you want to know what someone actually wants, stop listening to what they say they want and watch instead. Who do they become when the stakes feel high? Do they push forward or pull back? Do they try to control or try to disappear? Do they seek permission or give it? That role is not their personality, it's their answer. And once you see it, you're watching them show you exactly where they hurt and what would heal them. Their reaction to unexpected free time. Watch what someone does the moment their calendar clears. Really watch. You just told them they have the entire afternoon to themselves, nothing scheduled, no obligation. Some people's faces light up like you handed them a lottery ticket. Others look panicked, almost guilty, and immediately start filling the void, checking email, scrolling, planning, organizing something that wasn't broken. That instinctive move tells you everything. The person who panics in empty time is often running from something. Boredom, self-reflection, the quiet where their own thoughts get too loud. They need the distraction more than they need the rest. The person who relaxes into it, they're comfortable with themselves, or at least more comfortable with being alone with their own mind. But here's where it gets richer. Notice how they fill it when they do relax. Do they choose something restorative or something that still keeps them in hustle mode, just off the clock? A CEO who spends their free afternoon answering non-urgent messages is still in the same cage, just without the paycheck. Someone who genuinely rests, who reads or walks or sits without guilt. They're telling you they believe they deserve to exist without producing. That's a window into whether they think their worth is tied to output or whether they feel inherently valuable. People rarely lie about what they do when nobody's watching and nothing's demanded of them. Free time is a mirror that shows you whether someone is running towards something they love or running away from something they fear, and which direction they choose when the pressure finally lifts. The number they round in their favor. Ask someone how much they spent on the weekend and they say about 50 when it was actually 47, and you catch them almost immediately, but they don't seem bothered. They're not lying so much as revealing something underneath the lie. Watch the direction of the rounding, always up on what they paid, always down on what they earned. Your friend stretches her therapy costs because the bigger number feels like proof she's serious about healing. Your partner shrinks the hours he worked because efficiency matters to his sense of self. This tiny arithmetic isn't about dishonesty, it's about the version of reality each person needs to believe. When we estimate numbers in our own favor, we're confessing which gaps we're trying to close, which insecurities we're dressing up as math. Numbers are supposed to be objective, but in conversation, they become emotional instruments. That 47 becomes 50 because the bigger purchase somehow justifies the weekend. The $40 paycheck becomes 35 because admitting the lower number feels like admitting you settled for less. The pressure point isn't the dishonesty, it's that rounding is invisible, nobody flags it, nobody keeps score. But it's relentless. Track the same person over weeks and months, and you'll see them always tilting the same way on the same topics. That consistency is their confession in plain sight. Listen not for the number itself, but for the direction of the tilt, the invisible thumb on the scale. That's where the real want lives, in the gap between what happened and what they needed it to have been, the story they're quietly selling themselves every single day, how they describe someone they envy. Listen to the specific words someone uses when they talk about a person they secretly wish they were, not the polite surface version, but the real texture underneath. There's a tell buried in every adjective. If they say, "She's so lucky," or "He just has it easy," you've found the envy, and lucky is code for unearned. Easy means they don't feel they're on the same playing field, and part of them resents that. But here's where it gets sticky. The exact things they fixate on reveal what they believe they're missing. Someone who keeps saying, "She's so confident," is probably wrestling with doubt underneath their own skin. Someone who repeats, "He doesn't even try and everything works out," is likely exhausted from their own effort and secretly furious the world doesn't reward them equally. The words are almost always an indirect complaint about themselves disguised as praise for someone else. You'll notice, too, that people rarely envy random traits. They envy things that contradict their own self-image. The workaholic notices the person with perfect work-life balance. The people pleaser watches the boundary setter with barely concealed frustration. So when someone describes another person with that particular flavor of admiration mixed with something acidic underneath, you're looking at a map of their inner hunger. They're showing you what they think would finally make them feel whole. The next time you hear that tone in yourself or someone else, pause and ask, what are they actually saying about what they believe they lack, the offer they refuse 3 times? Watch someone decline dessert 3 times before eating half of it. Listen to a friend reject your invitation to something they actually want to do. A business partner says they're not interested in collaboration but keeps asking questions about it. A family member declines the holiday invite twice, then shows up anyway. Someone attracted to you needs 3 conversations before admitting they were thinking about that first one. None of that is indecision. It's a ritual. The first no tests how badly you want them there. The second is armor against looking too eager. The third is permission, because if you ask a 4th time, the yes belongs to you, not their vanity. Most people stop after the first or second no and call it rejection, but what those refusals actually reveal is that the person cares enough to negotiate their own comfort with wanting something. They need the pressure of your persistence to override their self-protection, not in a manipulative way, but in the way someone needs to hear a reason to let themselves have what they want. The real pressure point is learning to read the quality of the no. Does it come with explanation, hesitation, a reason? That tells you whether to extend the offer again. 3 times is the old magic number. After that, you're pushing. Before that, you might just be respecting someone's fear of their own desire. The pattern works because it gives people plausible deniability. They didn't choose it, you had to convince them. That small distance between choice and pressure is where a lot of human connection actually lives. What they want witnessed. There's a moment when someone tells you something hard, a win they're proud of, a fear that keeps them awake, a thing they've kept quiet for years, and they pause. They're not fishing for a response. They're checking if you're actually there, actually listening, actually getting it. That pause is the pressure point. What they want, more than advice or reassurance, is to be seen doing or being the thing they're confessing. They want a witness who won't minimize it, turn it into a story about themselves, or immediately try to fix it. A therapist or a real friend understands this. Most people don't. You tell someone you're scared about your career and they launch into their own layoff story. You share something vulnerable and they respond with "at least" or platitudes. You finally speak the shame out loud and they change the subject. What you needed was for them to stay in the room with you, to let the weight of it be real for a moment, to say something that proves they heard you, not the edited version. This is why people are starving for connection, even in crowded lives. It's not that nobody listens, it's that almost nobody witnesses. The pressure point is this: people will move mountains for someone who can sit with what they're really saying without rushing to comfort or correct. When you do this, when you simply reflect back what you heard, when you ask the follow-up that shows you were actually tracking, when you let them have their moment without stealing the stage, you become someone they will remember. You become the person who saw them, their loyalty under mild cost. You want to know if someone actually cares about you or if they just like the convenience. Here is the test nobody talks about. Introduce a small inconvenience and watch what they do. Not drama, not sacrifice, just a mild bump. Maybe you need a favor that takes 40 minutes. Maybe you're moving and asking friends to help load boxes. Maybe you need honest feedback that might make them slightly uncomfortable to give. Watch who hesitates. Watch who agrees fast but cancels later. Watch who shows up but checks their phone the whole time. The people who stick around when there is no reward in it for them, when the cost is real enough to feel but small enough to be optional, those are the ones telling you something true about how they value you. It is not about grand gestures. It is about the quiet willingness to be slightly inconvenienced because you matter more than their comfort in that moment. Most people are loyal when loyalty is free, when being in your orbit costs them nothing. But introduce that small friction, that mild price tag, and suddenly the real ones separate from the merely nearby ones. The people worth keeping are usually the ones who do not even make it about the cost. They just shift and do the thing. That absence of complaint, that natural pivot toward helping even when it pulls them off their own path, that is the real signal. Everything else is just proximity dressed up as friendship, and mild cost is the lie detector that separates the two. The question answered with a question. Ask your partner where they want to eat, and they hit you back with, Where do you want to go? Ask a colleague if they liked your presentation and they respond, "What did you think?" Most people call that evasion, but watch closer. When someone answers your question with their own question, they're leaking something real. They're anxious about what you're thinking. They want approval, but won't ask for it directly. They're testing whether you'll lead or whether they have to carry the whole conversation. The question as answer works as a pressure point because it exposes the power dynamic someone feels trapped in, and what they actually need has nothing to do with the restaurant or the presentation feedback. When someone mirrors your question back, they're often saying something quieter. I don't feel safe saying what I want straight up, so I'm asking you first to check if it's okay. It's a protection move, sure, but it's also a read. They're testing your tone, watching whether you'll get frustrated with being deflected, buying time to sense whether the ground feels steady. Most people interpret this as pure avoidance and push harder, which makes the other person retreat further into their shell. Instead, try noticing the pattern without judgment, without needing to fix it immediately. If you're comfortable naming it gently, something like, "I'm asking because I genuinely want your take, not because I'm testing you," you'll often watch their whole body soften. Sometimes people just need explicit permission to stop protecting themselves first, to believe that telling you what they actually want won't cost them something. How they treat an old friend's success. You get promoted, land the deal, or announce something you're genuinely proud of. Watch what happens next. The person who claimed to be your closest ally suddenly goes very still, or they rush to find the catch. The salary that's not as good as it sounds, the job that will kill you with hours, the thing they heard about that company. It's not criticism dressed up as care. It's the quick reframing of your win into something smaller, because your success just changed the math in their head. For most people, a friend's win is still a win. But for people living inside a zero-sum narrative where there's only so much good fortune to go around, your rise feels like their descent. They cannot genuinely celebrate you without feeling like they're losing ground, so they don't. What reveals itself in that moment is something almost always unconscious. Someone decent can feel a flicker of envy. That's human, but what they do with that flicker matters enormously. Do they name it, sit with it, and then choose to show up anyway? Or do they let it drive the narrative, turning your joy into evidence of unfairness? The way someone handles your win when they're struggling tells you everything about their relationship with scarcity, whether they believe the world is big enough for both of you to flourish, or whether they're playing a game where your light dims theirs. The real pressure point isn't the words they use, it's the hesitation before they speak. Pay attention to that pause. How long it lasts tells you what you need to know, what they consider an emergency. Watch someone's face when their coffee order is wrong. Notice the speed of a text reply when plans fall through. Hear the tone shift the moment something feels urgent to them. That's your signal. What someone treats as a crisis, what makes them drop everything and summon the shaky voice, is a direct read on what actually matters underneath all their polite words. A person who treats delayed responses as emergencies is broadcasting that connection feels fragile to them. Someone who panics over a small work mistake is confessing that their identity is tangled up in being flawless. The person who can stay calm through chaos but falls apart over a canceled trip, they're starving for freedom or escape. That trip was their lifeline. Most of us don't see our own pressure points until something activates them. But if you pay attention to what throws another person, you begin mapping the invisible load they carry. The emergency reveals the weight. It also whispers where they're most tender, where they've been hurt before, where they learned not to trust the world to stay stable. And here's where it gets sharp. Once you know what someone's emergency is, you know exactly what can shake them down to the bone. That knowledge becomes a choice. You can weaponize it or you can guard it. The kinder path is noticing it silently, understanding the wound beneath it, and choosing not to press that button casually or at all. That's when you transform into someone rare to them, someone who sees and refuses to hurt them with what they see. The person who knows your pressure points and guards them anyway, that's the one worth holding on to. Their comfort with owing someone. Watch someone accept a favor. Really watch them. Do they say yes with relief or do they hesitate, get quiet, make a joke about owing you one? The speed at which they relax into debt tells you something sharp about how they move through the world. Some people collect small obligations like they're nothing, easy and breezy. Others grip the idea of being indebted like it's a threat. Neither is right, but both reveal what they actually value. If someone is comfortable saying yes to help and then forgetting about it, no mental footnote, no invisible ledger, they either trust the people around them deeply or they don't believe relationships keep score. That's a person with low friction social confidence. But watch the person who flinches at owing. They might be calculating, protective, afraid of being trapped. Or they could simply have learned early that nothing is ever truly free, that debt is just delayed punishment in disguise. The real tell is what they do with power when they have it. Someone who felt okay being in your debt later, they tend to hold others' debts lightly too. Someone who feared it, they often keep meticulous track, not out of spite, but out of an old need to balance every scale before it tips. Your job isn't to judge which one they are. Your job is to notice. When you offer help, does their face relax or tighten? That small shift shows you whether they see connection as a safe exchange or as risk. And once you know that, you know how they'll treat you when the roles flip and you're the one asking. The joke they can't take. You make a lighthearted jab at someone's job, their hobby, their laugh, something small and harmless, and you watch their whole face shift. Not a smile, not even a polite recovery. They go quiet or they snap back harder than the moment deserved. That sharp reaction is a window into exactly where they are fragile, where identity and esteem have fused together, where a joke lands like a threat because it touched something they are not sure about themselves. People have thick skin about things they actually own. A secure parent laughs when you joke about their chaotic house. A confident musician riffs off a comment about their playing, but hands someone a mirror to a part of themselves they're already anxious about, their intelligence, their attractiveness, their worthiness in their field, and suddenly humor becomes interrogation. The joke was fine. The self-doubt was always there. You just revealed it. This is why the things people cannot laugh about tell you more than the things they broadcast with confidence. Their career ambitions, their family status, their body, their sexual history. Wherever they flinch, that is where the real story lives. It is not about being cruel or weaponizing humor. It is about recognizing that when someone genuinely cannot receive a joke, you are not being rejected for being unfunny. You are being told what they are protecting, what they fear, what part of their identity sits on shaky ground. And here's the thing worth sitting with. Look at your own flinches too. The jokes that sting, the teasing you deflect or over-explain. You have found the exact place that deserves your attention, not your defense. How fast they forgive power. Watch someone get cut off in traffic, seething, knuckles white on the wheel, then watch that face the moment they realize it was their boss. The anger doesn't soften, it evaporates. What you are witnessing is not grace, but a nervous system performing an instant calculation. What do I lose if I stay angry? The speed of forgiveness reveals the power map underneath every relationship. We forgive fast what we fear losing access to, and we hold grudges against what we think we can afford to lose. The executive who bumps their assistant in the hallway apologizes once and forgets it happened. The assistant replays it at home for a week. Neither is being dishonest. They are running different survival math. If you need someone's approval, their money, their influence, or their continued presence in your life, your body will not waste energy staying mad at them. Forgiveness becomes strategy, not virtue, and people who forgive instantly are not always emotionally evolved. They are often the most dependent. They cannot afford the tax of your resentment. Now flip the lens. Notice who takes longest to forgive you. They are showing you the exact amount of power they believe they hold. A person holding an indefinite grudge is someone who can bear the cost of your anger without flinching. Speed of forgiveness maps onto power like almost nothing else in behavior. The next time someone bounces back from your mistake with ease, ask whether they are generous or just scared. That answer tells you where you actually stand in their calculus, the category they refuse to be in. Watch someone bristle at a label and you've glimpsed their hunger. A person who hates being called anxious is often burning to be seen as capable. Someone who despises sensitive is fighting tooth and nail to be taken seriously. The categories they push away hardest reveal the distance between who they believe they are and who they're terrified everyone else sees. You've done this. Maybe you flinch at needy or lazy or boring, and that visceral recoil tells the whole story. It's not the word itself that stings, it's the future it promises. Lazy means you'll never matter. Anxious means you're trapped in a corner of weakness. Selfish means you're kicked out of the tribe. So people fight the category instead of fighting the fear underneath. They argue, deflect, prove you wrong, anything to avoid sitting with the possibility that some part of the label hit. This is where the real pressure lives. The thing they refuse to be is the thing they most desperately want to become. A person rejecting ordinary is hunting for significance. Someone who won't accept difficult is chasing peace or ease. Someone bristling at unreliable is aching to be trusted, to be the person others lean on without hesitation. If you want to understand what drives someone, what they'll sacrifice for, what corners they'll cut, what steals their sleep, find the category they're running from hardest. That rejection is their compass, pointing straight toward their real hunger. Help them move toward what they're actually chasing instead of naming what they're fleeing, what they do when overlooked. Watch what happens the moment someone realizes you've forgotten they existed in a room. Their body doesn't just shrink, it reorganizes. A hand touches their phone. Eyes dart to find a mirror or reflective surface. They laugh a little too loud at something mildly funny, testing whether sound can rebuild the attention they lost. This is the speed of human desperation for visibility, unfolding in seconds. Overlooked people don't accept the silence. Some become louder, interrupting more, volunteering for things they don't care about, manufacturing drama just to matter again. Others go the opposite direction, building walls so perfect and polished that if you do finally notice them, you'll feel like you've spotted something rare. Both moves reveal the same hunger, the need to be seen as real, as worthy of someone's mental real estate. The strangest part? People who've been chronically overlooked often don't ask for attention directly. They perform it. They become the person who remembers everyone else's birthday, the one who laughs loudest at your jokes, the one who reorganizes the kitchen unprompted. They've learned that being useful is safer than being visible. At least then, if they're forgotten, it feels like a choice instead of a verdict on their worth. Next time you're in a group and someone goes quiet, watch not what they say, but what they do with their hands, where their eyes go, how they position their body. That small, invisible person is telling you exactly what they're willing to do to feel like they matter. And often, that's the first clue to understanding what they'll become when nobody's watching. Their tell when faking sincerity. Watch someone apologize when they don't mean it, and you'll see a tiny delay before the facial expression lands. Real regret hits the face almost simultaneously with the words. The eyes soften, the mouth narrows slightly, the whole thing arrives as one honest package. Fake sincerity? The expression lands a beat late, like someone remembered to put on the mask after the script already started. It's the micro gap between thought and performance that gives it away. You've probably felt this in your gut 100 times without naming it. Someone says they're proud of you, but their eyes stay flat. They say they forgive you, but their shoulders stay braced. The voice modulation is perfect. They hit all the emotional beats, yet something doesn't sync. That's because genuine feeling isn't performed. It bleeds through involuntarily. When people are faking it, they're managing multiple things at once. The words, the tone, the face, the posture. Something always slips. Often, it's the eyes going dead while the mouth smiles, or the nod arriving just slightly too slow, like they're dubbing a film in the wrong language. The real tell is inconsistency. One channel of communication contradicts another. Your nervous system is built to catch these tiny breaks in the pattern, the places where the mask doesn't fit quite right. Learn to trust that dissonance more than the polished apology, more than the right words spoken in the right tone. When you feel that micro mismatch, you're not being paranoid or overthinking. Your instinct caught what your brain was too polite to name, and that signal is worth listening to every single time. The generosity that keeps a ledger. You know the type? The friend who always remembers they picked up your coffee last month, or the parent who reminds you 3 years later they paid for your car repair. Their generosity is real. The scorecard is real too. What they're actually doing is wearing a mask that says, "I help," while keeping a hidden set of books underneath. Every act of kindness becomes a chip they can cash in later, whether it's guilt, obligation, or leverage. The trap is that they've confused giving with lending, and you didn't sign the contract. This isn't about intentional manipulation. Most people don't consciously track this way. It's something quieter. They give because it feels good to be needed, to be the hero, to know someone owes them something. But the moment you can't repay in gratitude or loyalty, the ledger gets pulled out. Suddenly, the generosity looks different. You weren't helped, you were invested in. The suffocating part happens slowly. You start managing their feelings instead of just being yourself. You owe them presence, agreement, deference. You become the emotional collateral on a debt you never borrowed. A real favor doesn't come with invisible strings attached, and people who keep score aren't actually generous. They're collecting down payments on your future compliance. If you find yourself feeling guilty around someone's kindness, stop and ask yourself, Are they giving freely, or are they building a case for why you should never leave them? That tension you feel is your answer, and it matters far more than the kindness itself ever could. How they leave a job. Watch someone resign, and you're watching their entire value system walk out the door. Not everyone tells you why they're really leaving. Most people don't even tell themselves. They'll say better opportunity or ready for a change, but the real reveal is in the method. Do they burn bridges with a scorched earth email at 11 p.m.? That's someone whose hurt has been calcifying, someone who needed to reclaim power fast. Do they stay exactly 2 weeks, finish projects, leave detailed handover notes? That person values belonging and reputation over rage. Do they ghost entirely, stop showing up? Fear, pure fear. Maybe of confrontation, maybe of their own anger, maybe of being stopped. The method reveals whether someone sees themselves as part of a community or as an outsider who was merely tolerating the arrangement. Someone who leaves cleanly, even when angry, trusts that the world is still safe. Someone who leaves messily is often protecting themselves from something they couldn't name while employed. And here's what cuts deep. The way someone exits shows you how they handle rejection, powerlessness, and change. It tells you whether they believe bridges can be rebuilt or whether they see the world in permanent categories. In with us, out with us, no middle ground. Pay attention to how people quit, because resignation reveals whether they see themselves as part of a system or forever outside it. If you're ever wondering who someone really is beneath the polite performance of employment, ask a former boss. The way they left tells you everything about their emotional architecture that their resume carefully hid, what they call honesty. Someone tells you the hard truth. Your project won't work, your partner's been distant, you're not ready, and you feel hurt. But notice what happens next. You call them honest. You might even say they're a good friend for telling you. What you're actually rewarding, though, is not honesty itself. It's the specific kind of honesty that aligns with what you already half believed but were too scared to say alone. Real honesty would also include the messier version, the feedback you didn't ask for, the observation that makes you uncomfortable because it lands sideways to your self-image. The thing someone notices that you've been avoiding for years, but that's rarely what people want when they praise someone for being honest. They want permission, they want validation, they want someone else to say the quiet part out loud so the burden feels shared. This is why the people you trust most aren't always the ones telling you the hardest truths. They're the ones telling you truths that feel like relief. The person who says what you need to hear, not what you're ready to hear. The trap is believing you value honesty when you really value alignment. Your partner gets praised for being honest when they confirm your anxieties. Your family member gets called blunt when they push back on your narrative. Next time someone earns the title of honest in your life, pause and ask, what did they confirm for me? What permission did that truth give? The answer often reveals less about them and far more about which stories you've been defending all along. The difficulty they choose on purpose. Watch someone pick the harder path when the easier one sits right there, and you're watching a confession, not about laziness or ambition, but about what they're actually trying to prove. A friend trains for a marathon instead of a 5K. A coworker takes the project everyone else sidesteps. Your sibling learns piano the slow, theory-first way when apps could teach them faster. The real question isn't why they picked hard, it's why that hard. Difficulty is a language, and people choose their dialect with surgical precision. When someone volunteers for something genuinely difficult, where failure is real, where progress is measurable, where the struggle shows, they're sending a signal. I am serious about this. I care enough to risk looking bad. They're also building proof. Easy things don't count. Anyone can do them, but if you spent months on it, sweated through doubt, hit a wall, and kept going, then what you made has actual weight. Nobody can dismiss it. Here's where it gets stranger. People often choose difficulty over pleasure because difficulty feels more real, more earned. A vacation is lovely but leaves no trace. A mountain climbed in bad weather becomes a story you inhabit for years. Notice what kind of hard someone volunteers for, and you see what kind of person they think they need to become, or more precisely, what they believe they must become to matter. Watch long enough, and a pattern emerges. The difficulty someone chooses almost always points backward to a wound, forward to a fear. The harder the path they volunteer for, the deeper the belief that easy versions of themselves wouldn't be enough. The permission they keep asking for. Watch what people ask permission for, and you're watching their self-doubt leak out in real time. Your partner checks in before seeing friends. Your colleague frames a mental health day like it's a favor they're requesting. Your parent apologizes before saying no to one more thing they don't want to do. None of them are actually waiting for a calendar check or a policy confirmation. They're asking if they matter enough to take up space, if resting makes them selfish, if their needs count at all. The repeated question is a small wound of self-doubt, a crack so wide they need someone else to fill it. Here's what most people miss. We say yes to the surface question, while the real message passes right through us. We give permission freely, watch them ask again the next week with the same apology in their voice, then wonder why it never sticks. Permission granted from outside is borrowed. It needs renewing every time. But there's a move that works better than just saying yes. When you spot the pattern, name it back to them without softening it. You don't actually need to ask me. Let it sit there. Sometimes people need to hear their own authority reflected back through someone else's eyes before their own voice gets loud enough to matter. That naming of what's really happening can crack something open. It's not fixing them, it's showing them they're already allowed. How they handle a shared secret. You tell someone something you haven't told anyone else, and then you watch what they do with it. Do they hold it like a sacred thing, or does it become currency the moment they walk into a room full of people who'd find it interesting? The way someone guards your vulnerability is the clearest mirror into whether they see you as a person or a resource to extract value from. When you give someone a secret, you are giving them power over your story, and what they choose to do with that power reveals their actual operating system. Whether they see boundaries as real or just speed bumps. Some people treat secrets like inheritances, holding on to them carefully because they understand that trust is the only real currency between humans, and they refuse to spend it carelessly. Others leak them casually into group chats or save them for the exact moment they need to one-up you in conversation. And suddenly, your confession becomes their ammunition in some petty social game. But here is the thing most people miss. Even small secrets matter more than the juicy ones. That you cried at the gym, that you doubt your abilities at work, that you feel lonely at parties despite the laughter. Watch closely how someone responds when you hand them something real and small and fragile. Do they make you feel smaller for admitting it, or do they honor the vulnerability it took to say it out loud? The texture of how someone holds your secrets is not separate from how they will hold your heart down the line. It is the blueprint. Pay attention. What they postpone indefinitely. The thing your partner keeps swearing they'll do but never does. Or that conversation you've rehearsed 1,000 times in your head but somehow never speak aloud. There's a diagnostic radar hidden in that gap. Most people blame postponement on low priority or simple laziness, but that guess is almost always too soft. Indefinite delay is sharper than that. It signals deep ambivalence, quiet terror, or a choice your conscious mind refuses to name. Someone might genuinely want to start their own business, but if they've been about to for 3 years without motion, what they're actually protecting themselves from isn't the work itself. It's the identity shift, the specific shame of calling themselves an entrepreneur, the concrete sting of failure that could happen in front of people who matter. A friend who reschedules therapy every time signals something too. They're not busy so much as guarding themselves from the vulnerability that comes with admitting something's broken and needs hands-on repair. The delay becomes the comfort, which means staying stuck feels safer than moving, even when staying stuck is quietly poisoning them from within. Here's what people resist hearing. I know I should almost always translates to, I know I'm supposed to want this, but something in me doesn't. That something wears the mask of procrastination, but moves like fear underneath. You want to know what someone truly values, not what they perform valuing. Stop listening to their stated goals and watch what they'll never actually do. The gap between what they claim matters and what they'll never get around to is where their real priorities sit, unspoken and almost always uncomfortable. Their choice of villain. Pay close attention to who gets cast as the villain in someone's recurring story, because that character is almost always defending something. Someone rants endlessly about lazy people, and what you're actually hearing is a belief system built on relentless work, maybe even work that's cost them sleep, relationships, joy. Another person fixates on selfish, rich people, and beneath that rage is a protective story. I am good because I sacrifice. The bad guy they reach for most often is a mirror of what they need to believe about themselves. We don't choose villains randomly, we choose them strategically, almost always to make ourselves the hero by contrast. Watch a parent blame teachers for their kids' failures, and you're not seeing frustration. You're watching someone protect the belief that they're already doing everything right. Listen to a manager obsess over employees lacking initiative, and you're hearing someone prop up the idea that success comes from individual grit, not systems or privilege or luck. Here's where it matters. Once you see someone's villain, you can predict what they'll reject, what feedback they'll never hear, what move they'll make next. Because admitting the villain might be complicated or might partly be them would shatter their whole story. So they don't shatter. They double down, collect evidence, build a worldview around why that person is the problem. If you want to know what someone truly needs to believe, stop listening to their righteous anger and start listening to which villain gets the most airtime in their life. That's not conviction. That's maintenance work disguised as principle. The praise they can't believe. Watch what happens when you compliment someone on real work. They smile, then immediately downshift, listing what went wrong, what could have been better, how it wasn't actually that impressive. That reflexive rejection is not humility. It's someone actively pushing away good news about themselves, and that tells you exactly where their self-doubt lives. The praise they brush off hardest is always the one they needed most, because it names the gap between how others see them and how they see themselves. That gap is a pressure point because it drives so many of their moves. Endless reassurance seeking, quiet sabotage of wins, staying in situations where they're undervalued because the environment matches their internal compass. Here's the thing. If you want to reach someone trapped in this pattern, don't pile on more praise. That bounces off every time. Instead, be specific and immovable about what you actually observed. You handled that call with precision. I watched it happen. Then stop. Don't explain why it matters or why they should feel proud. Let the facts sit there. People who struggle to believe good things about themselves often trust concrete observations more easily than emotional cheerleading. A witness statement lands differently than validation. You're not trying to convince them they're worthy. You're just refusing to let them rewrite what already occurred. That small act of refusing to participate in their self-edit can shift something, how they behave when unrecorded. There's a moment in every interaction where the phone goes down, the conversation shifts from public to private, and you see who someone actually is. The mask doesn't drop all at once. It loosens, gets quieter, sometimes meaner. What you're watching is the gap between the self they want you to record and the self that exists when nobody's taking notes. And that gap tells you almost everything. A person who is kind when the camera is on but dismissive when it's off hasn't changed their nature. They've just removed the cost of honesty. Their real values were there all along, just hidden behind an audience. The reverse matters too. Someone who is more generous, more vulnerable, more thoughtful when they think no one is watching, that person is fighting their own fear of judgment. They're not performing kindness, they're practicing it. Pay attention to the exhale, the tone that drops, the laugh that gets louder or dies. Notice whether someone checks their phone less or more when they relax around you. Watch if they straighten up or slouch. These tiny calibrations reveal whether they were ever actually comfortable with you or whether comfort only arrived when surveillance left the room. The people worth keeping are the ones whose private self won't shame their public one. Not perfectly consistent, nobody is, but fundamentally the same underneath. When they're unrecorded and still kind, still careful with their words, still present, still treating you the same way, that's when you know you're seeing the real person, not the highlight reel with the pressure finally off. The change they announce every year. Stand in any room in early January and you'll catch it. That moment when someone's eyes light up and they declare it with real conviction. This is the year. This time it sticks. The weight comes off, the novel gets written, the relationship heals. You feel it too, that ember of belief, because they're burning with certainty. But something strange happens the instant they speak it aloud. Their brain floods with dopamine like they've already crossed the finish line. The announcement becomes the accomplishment. They've named it, made it real in your mind, claimed it publicly, and that neurological hit is so satisfying that the actual grind feels less necessary now. Fast forward to February when friction arrives, when the work demands discomfort and tedium and zero audience, and the brain whispers, we already got our reward. We already had the moment. Why chase more when that dopamine spike is already locked in? So the goal softens, the habit stalls, and next January, the whole ritual begins again because the announcement is so rewarding, it eclipses the invisible part. The showing up when nobody watches, the slow rebuild that asks nothing of your ego. The pressure point here is real. We confuse the thrill of going public with the substance of actual change. If something matters, try keeping it close for a while. Let it live in silence first. Let the momentum build without witnesses. The people worth believing in you won't need the announcement. They'll recognize the shift, their reaction to a better offer. Drop a better offer into a conversation and you learn more in 30 seconds than you would in months of questions. A job with better pay, a partner who actually listens, an apartment with real light coming through the windows. Watch what happens, not what they say, but the speed and texture of how they say it. If they lunge at it before you finish the sentence, they were already halfway out the door just waiting for permission. If they slam it down with reasons, practical reasons, emotional reasons, Pay attention to which ones they reach for first because that tells you what the real barrier is. The hesitation is where it gets interesting. Are they genuinely weighing trade-offs, or are they performing consideration because they think that's what you want to hear? People stay in situations less because they love them and more because the friction of leaving feels bigger than the daily ache of staying. A better offer scrambles that math. Suddenly, there is a shape to leaving, a destination, an actual cost they can calculate instead of an infinite wait. So, their gut response, the panic, the relief, the excitement, or that deflating "I'll think about it," is your window into how trapped they really feel and exactly where the trap is. The stalled conversation, the subject change, the sudden defensiveness about their current choice. That is the real story. Most people will not tell you directly that they are unhappy, but show them the door and watch their face move. Their body knows the truth before their voice does. What they buy after bad news, you get the call about the job you didn't get, and 15 minutes later, you're in a checkout line with things you don't need. Expensive coffee, a new shirt, something you saw someone else wearing. This isn't random. When reality lands hard, humans reach for objects like they're reaching for solid ground. Bad news creates a vacuum where control vanishes, and we fill it by buying something, anything that makes us feel like we're still steering the ship. The purchase isn't about the thing. It's about the moment you hand over the card and the cashier smiles and the transaction completes, and for a second, the world feels orderly again. This pattern shows up everywhere. Relationship ends, medical scare arrives, criticism lands at work, and spending spikes. Retail therapy isn't a joke. It's a real psychological pressure valve. The darker part, retailers know this. Why do you think holiday commercials hit hardest during uncertain times? Why do stress sale notifications land when anxiety is high? They're selling the feeling of agency when control feels gone. If you want to know what someone truly feared or lost, watch what they bought in the week after. Their purchases are a confession. The person who suddenly upgrades their phone after a setback, the one who buys new workout gear after relationship collapse, they're all saying the same thing without words. I need to feel like something in my life is still mine to choose. Next time you feel the urge to buy after hard news, pause and ask yourself whether you're buying the thing or buying back control, the audience they perform for. Walk into any room and watch who changes. Your coworker becomes louder around their boss. Your friend gets quieter around their ex's new partner. Your parents suddenly polite when the neighbors visit. None of them are lying. They're all just different versions of themselves, calibrated for whoever's watching. And here's what matters. The audience someone chooses to perform for tells you almost everything about what they actually want. If someone performs confidence in front of strangers but hides vulnerability at home, they want external validation more than intimacy. If they're the comedian at parties but serious one-on-one, they want to matter in groups. If they soften around children but harden around peers, they want to be needed, to be the one in control. The real pressure point isn't that people are fake, it's that people are honest in their selections. We don't accidentally pick our audiences. We pick them because they see something in us that matters. Your shy friend who becomes animated with one specific person, that person is holding up a mirror to a version of themselves they actually like. Your ambitious colleague who drops all pretense around their mentor, that mentor represents permission to be seen as they really are. The shift in presence is the broadcast. Don't judge the performance. Instead, ask what they're reaching for. What does this audience give them that others won't? What wound or hunger does their attention fill? That answer, the one they might not even know they're radiating, that's where their real desire breaks through. Pay attention to who brings out which version of someone. You're watching them choose what they want most, how they lose. Watch someone's body the moment they've already decided they're beaten. Shoulders drop, they stop fighting the small stuff. They start narrating their own defeat like it's someone else's story. Here's the hard part. People don't actually lose when circumstances turn against them. They lose when they trade the risk of trying for the comfort of knowing what comes next. Bad certainty feels safer than the vertigo of real possibility. You see it everywhere. The relationship that dies not from betrayal, but from one partner deciding they're fundamentally incompatible, then filtering every conversation through that lens as proof. The career stall because someone tells themselves once they're not a management person, and now every interaction confirms it. The health goal abandoned not because the body can't change, but because the mind already checked out. The trap is that losing feels rational afterward. They point to evidence, the failed attempt, the cold comment, the hard number, and call it reason. But if you watch closely, the real surrender didn't happen when facts got worse. It happened when they stopped believing their own comeback was possible. Most people you think have lost haven't run out of options. They've run out of the strange, stubborn faith it takes to act like the ending isn't written yet. That's where the pressure lands hardest. They're not hunting for a way out anymore. They're hunting for permission to stop. And once you recognize that switch, you understand why motivation talks bounce off them like water. They're not stuck. They've already moved on to their own funeral. The question they ask about your salary. Someone leans in at a dinner party or a coffee meeting and asks, "So what do you make?" Most of us feel the freeze. The question itself is jarring, almost rude, yet something about it lands differently depending on who asks and how. That reaction tells you everything. What people want to know about your salary is rarely about the number. They're asking, am I doing okay? Am I earning enough? Does my choice matter? Am I winning? Your answer becomes the mirror they hold up to their own life, which is why the question often feels aggressive rather than curious. When someone asks what you earn, they're usually asking if they should feel secure or scared. The truly revealing part is what comes after you answer. Do they deflate, relax, get defensive? People who feel genuinely confident in their path rarely ask about yours. They're too busy building theirs. The ones who press harder or who immediately compare are usually running on a scarcity script. There's only so much money, so much success, so much proof that you're enough. They need your number to recalibrate their own worth. Here's the sticky part. If you find yourself obsessing over how to answer or rehearsing a number that sounds bigger than it is, you've already let the question own you. The salary is just data, but the story you tell about it and the story they're looking for in your face when you tell it, that's where the real pressure lives. Pay attention to when you feel the need to perform, because that's where your own worth script is still running on someone else's timeline. How they receive new information. Watch someone when you offer them something that contradicts what they already believe. Really watch. Notice if they lean in or pull back, if they ask a real question or defend what they already know. Most people will swear they are truth seekers, but the truth is they are defending the version of reality they have already paid for with time, emotion, identity. The way someone receives new information tells you exactly how much room they have to grow, to change, to be wrong, and survive it. Someone who immediately argues before understanding is signaling that being right feels safer than being curious. Someone who listens, pauses, sits with discomfort, that person is already different from who they were yesterday. This is not just about manners or patience, it is about how they experience themselves. People who can hold new ideas without judging them immediately are people who trust themselves enough to be uncertain. People who snap shut, who defend before they hear, are people whose identity feels fragile, threatened by anything that does not confirm what they already are. So pay attention to the texture of their questions. Do they ask to genuinely understand or to catch you in contradiction? Do they say, I had not thought of it that way? Or do they smile and move on, already decided before you finish speaking? The way someone receives information is the way someone receives the possibility of being different. If you watch for that one tell, you know whether they are building a life or just defending one. What they call luck in themselves. You ever notice how people who win the lottery call it luck, but people who ace a job interview credit their hard work and preparation? Same person, different story depending on whose side of the win they're on. That gap between I got lucky and I earned that is where you glimpse what someone truly believes about their own power. When someone attributes their success to external factors, timing, a good day, the stars aligning, they're not just being humble, they're outsourcing ownership. Their nervous system doesn't trust that they caused the good thing. So if the good thing happens again, they can't replicate it. They can only hope. But watch someone who says, I made that happen, even when the odds were wild. They're wired differently. They notice what they did, what they controlled, what they can do next time. That's not arrogance. That's a nervous system that knows it has agency. Here's where it gets sharp. People who externalize their wins internalize their losses with brutal intensity. Failed because the deck was stacked? Maybe. But that same person will replay a rejection for months, convinced it was something catastrophically wrong on their end. The luck narrative lets them off the hook for success, but drowns them in shame for failure. So when you're around someone and they talk about their wins, listen for who they think caused them. That tells you whether they believe they can make it happen again, whether they see themselves as a force or a passenger. And that belief, more than any actual luck, is what determines whether they will ever try again. The relationship they over-explain. Listen for the person who brings up their partner unprompted and then just keeps going. Details multiplying, defenses building against questions nobody asked. They explain how good it is, how misunderstood the other person is, how it all makes sense if you really think about it. And somehow, the more they talk, the smaller your voice gets. You're not being convinced, you're being managed. That over-explaining is the sound of someone trying to close a gap between the story they tell themselves and what they suspect might be true underneath. We over-explain the things we're secretly uncertain about. A genuinely solid relationship doesn't need a press release. You mention your person naturally, then your mind moves to the next thought. But when there's friction you haven't named, or when you're performing a confidence you don't actually feel, the words keep coming like water searching for a leak. The over-justifier isn't trying to persuade you, they're trying to persuade themselves. They're building a wall out of language because the actual foundation feels shaky. Here's where your attention matters. Watch what someone defends without being challenged. That's where their real doubt is living, rent-free in their mind. It doesn't mean the relationship is doomed. Doubt and real love absolutely coexist. But it's a signal that someone is working harder to believe their own story than they should have to. That exhaustion underneath all those words, the tightness in their voice, that's the actual thing you're hearing. Next time you hear it, resist the urge to reassure them. Just listen to where they're trembling, how they say goodbye. Watch the moment someone's hand touches the door frame on their way out. That's when the mask drops. The goodbye reveals what the hour-long conversation never could, whether any part of them actually wants to be away from you. Some people linger in the threshold, shoulders turned, but eyes still tracking the room, asking one more question they didn't genuinely need answered. Others are already down the hall, voice trailing behind their body, already halfway to whatever comes next. Neither move is polite or impolite. They're just honesty in motion. When someone feels genuine pull towards staying connected, the goodbye gets friction. Their body wants to leave, but something in them resists. A pause that costs them effort, a second where they're split between what they should do and what they want to do. That's the tell. Contrast it with the person whose goodbye flows smooth and fast. No internal tug of war, no hesitation muscle. They've already left, just waiting for the body to catch up. Watch Kids at Bedtime and you'll see it plainest. The child who keeps reappearing in the living room with invented questions is still tethered to the room and the people in it. The one asleep before you finish the sentence isn't. Both are honest. You can use this the next time you're spiraling about whether someone truly values your time together. Skip the words. Skip the promises. Watch the goodbye instead. Does leaving cost them something? Is there weight in it, resistance, a moment where they're pulled in two directions? That friction, that small, real hesitation, that's where the answer actually lives. Their response to slow replies. Watch what happens the moment someone waits longer than they're comfortable with for your text back. Do they spiral into angry assumptions, go radio silent themselves, or do they just double text, casual and warm? That gap between your message and theirs is a microscope for what they actually need from you. The impatient person isn't necessarily cruel. They're often just someone whose attention currency runs on speed. Fast feels like care to them. Slow feels like proof you're deprioritizing them, even if you're just in a meeting or cooking dinner. Meanwhile, someone else barely notices the delay at all. They're not wired to interpret silence as rejection. They trust you're handling your life. Here's where it cuts deeper. People reveal their deepest insecurity through how they handle waiting. A partner who floods your phone after 10 minutes, they might be battling abandonment fears that run so deep they don't even have words for it. Someone who goes ice cold when ignored, control and respect might be tangled together for them in ways they don't even recognize. And the person unbothered by delays, they may have learned early that independence keeps you safe. None of this means anyone is wrong. It means their relationship to time and responsiveness is a direct line to what makes them feel valued or threatened. If you want to actually understand someone, skip the surface chatter. Notice how they react when you're not immediately available. That reaction is their truth speaking without a script, unfiltered and honest in ways they couldn't stage if they tried.